Chapter 160. On this day, the entrance of the Jiangfu was really bustling with noise and excitement. The crowd of onlookers formed 3 circles inside and 3 circles outside, practically blocking the main road in front of the minister's fu. This was because the imperial edict had arrived to bestow marriage to Hong and Junju. Hong and Junju's reputation in the capital could be said to be known by everyone. She was born beautiful and had won the favor of the Empress Dowager. Perhaps the heavens were jealous of her beauty, but she had been repeatedly framed and thrown into prison. There were those who had tender feelings for the fairer sex, and there were also those who secretly hit her when she was down. For a moment, she was in the limelight. At this moment, in the main hall of the Jiangfu, people were kneeling on the ground, with Jiang Quan and Jiang Yuan kneeling at the front. The palace eunuch dragged out his voice and said in a shrill voice, in accordance with the will of the emperor, "Today the Empress Dowager has decreed that Prince Jining will be chosen, bestowed with a palanquin and bestowed with a pair of flower plume eyes. The daughter of the Minister of War, Jiang Shi, is dignified and virtuous, filial and benevolent. She will be appointed as Princess Jining, a match made in gold and jade, by the emperor." After he finished speaking, the eunuch glanced at the person kneeling on the ground and said, "Hong and Junju, receive the edict." Jiang Yuan paused slightly, then smiled and stepped forward to receive the imperial edict. Baiji hurriedly stepped forward and handed over a heavy brocade pouch. She smiled and said, "Eunuch has worked hard. Junju is too polite." The eunuch weighed the brocade pouch in his hand and smiled in satisfaction. His tone was also very cordial. "This is a match made in gold and jade, we will also share in Junju's happiness." He looked at Jiang Quan, whose face was somewhat stiff, and raised his eyebrows. It had long been rumored that Minister Jiang was very harsh towards this daughter of his, and now it seemed that it was true. Empress Dowager Ida had the heart to protect Jiang Yuan, and Jiang Yuan would be the female mistress of Jining Wangfu in the future. In the Great Jin dynasty, she could be said to be a person who could summon the wind and summon the rain. The eunuch wanted to curry favor, so he took the opportunity to knock Jiang Quan down a peg. He said in a shrill voice, "What, this is a good thing, why does Jiang Daren not seem very happy?" Jiang Quan was startled and forced a smile. "I am so happy that I don't know what to say. My daughter's aptitude is mediocre, and she really has a high social status in Jining Wangfu. Receiving the Empress Dowager's protection is her good fortune." The eunuch put on a fake smile and said, "Jiang Daren is right. Aren't we under the protection of the Empress Dowager?" The Empress Dowager said that in the future, as long as Xiao Wangye doesn't treat the princess well, the Empress Dowager will stand up for her. The Empress Dowager dotes on Junju like her own granddaughter. If anyone dares to bully Junju, she will definitely teach them a lesson. These words once again caused Jiang Quan's face to turn green and purple. It was clear that these words were meant for him to hear, but the threat in these words really made one's heart feel stifled. However, although the eunuchs in the palace looked inconspicuous, they were the emperor and Empress Dowager's people. They couldn't be offended easily and had to give them face. Thus, he could only swallow the anger in his heart and smile for a while. With great difficulty, he sent the eunuch away. Only then did Jiang Quan look towards Jiang Yuan and sneered, "You are truly capable. Father overpraises me, this is all the Empress Dowager's blessing." Jiang Yuan lowered her head and smiled. Seeing that expression, Jiang Quan felt a burst of gloominess in his heart. He could not wait to kick Jiang Yuan out the door. At once, he snorted again, turned around and left with a flick of his sleeves. After Jiang Quan left, Lian Xiao frowned and said, "Miss, this Empress's edict." This imperial edict came without any preparation, but at the moment, she could not disobey it. Lian Xiao sighed in her heart. As a member of an official's household, one's marriage was not something one could control. Even if Jining Wang's character was not bad, and her own miss did not seem to reject him, such a direct marriage bestowal somewhat disregarded Jiang Ruan's intentions. For example, at this moment, there was not a trace of joy on Jiang Ruan's face. Baiji also felt a little sad and looked at Jiang Yuan with some worry. Jiang Yuan shook her head, "Tidy up a bit, we will make a trip to Jining Wang's Fu later. Xiao Xiao's actions were so fast that she had not expected it. But even so, there were still some matters that needed to be clarified. In the 8th prince's Fu, Xianli fiercely swept all the things on the table onto the floor. With a pitter-patter sound, the exquisite porcelain was smashed to pieces on the floor. White sharp fragments splashed everywhere, and the people standing at the side all had small cuts on their palms. Xianli suddenly sat down on a chair. He seemed to be somewhat powerless and took a deep breath before he slowly said, "So that's how it is. So it turns out that he has designs on the Empress Dowager." Previously, there were rumors in the palace that Xiao Xiao had bestowed a marriage upon the emperor. Presumably, it was Xiao Xiao's decree. From the various events that followed, it could be seen that the emperor did not approve of Jiang Ruan becoming Jining Wang Fei. Now that the Empress Dowager had suddenly sent a decree, Xianli suddenly understood. Xiao Xiao had never thought of using the emperor to bestow a marriage. The person he had been looking for had always been Empress Dowager Ida. The rumors that had been spread before were merely to confuse the public's vision. It had also caused Xianli to panic and even agree to Xian Lang's clumsy plan to force a marriage. In the end, Xian Lang had died. He had lost a useful chess piece in the palace, and he had almost been implicated. Xiao Xiao, this prince has really underestimated him. Xianli narrowed his eyes. Although there was still the usual gentle smile hanging on his lips, his eyes revealed a sinister look. He gnashed his teeth in anger, as if he wanted to kill Xiao Xiao. For someone as proud and arrogant as him, what he hated the most was to be toyed with by others. But now, he had been led by the nose by Xiao Xiao. How could he be reconciled? The young man sitting below him also had an ugly expression on his face. One of the fingers on his left hand was abruptly missing. It was none other than the second young master of the Jiang family, Jiang Chao. Xianli was furious, but in his heart, he did not feel any better. The Jiang siblings were both thorns in his eyes. Now that the Empress Dowager had issued a decree, Jiang Ruan would be able to rely on the big tree of Jining Wangfu. In the future, it would be even more difficult to deal with her. "Have you cleaned up the things that I had you do last time?" Xianli changed the topic and asked Jiang Chao. Replying to Your Highness, Jiang Chao hurriedly replied, "Everything has been arranged. Now that the matters in the palace have been put down, there will not be any more hiccups. Xian Lang has no brains. Even if he dies, he only has himself to blame." Xianli indifferently looked at the broken pieces of porcelain in front of him. "We have to change people in the palace." Although Xian Lang seemed incompetent in the palace, he was a good way to pass on information. Now that Xian Lang was dead, it would not be good to place more people in the palace, so they could only act from the people currently in the palace. "Does Your Highness want to act from among the princes?" "Now that I look at it, this subordinate feels that the 13th prince looks smart. Perhaps we can use him," Jiang Chao said. Everyone had seen Xian Pei's actions that day. They all said that although the 13th prince did not reveal his mountain and did not reveal his water, he was actually an intelligent person. The crafty servants who had originally served the 13th prince were now very respectful to him. The emperor also began to value him and would occasionally send people to deliver some things to him. However, no matter how smart the 13th prince was, the lowly status of his birth mother doomed him to never have the qualifications to compete with Xianli for that position. This kind of person was not a threat and was smart. He was the most suitable to be used as a chess piece. Smart? Being too smart is not a good thing. Xianli slowly shook his head. "I am just afraid that he is Xiao Xiao's man." "You mean?" Jiang Chao stared blankly. How could a brat who is still wet behind the ears have the ability to turn the tables? "I am afraid that it was Xiao Xiao who taught him the methods. The crown prince is probably the same. I still do not understand why Xiao Xiao did not personally take action. However, I do not want to use Xian Pei," Xianli said. There was another reason that he did not mention. For some reason, seeing Xian Pei always made him feel uncomfortable. It was as if some strange emotion had arisen in his heart and he was extremely unwilling to see Xian Pei. If we cannot find the 13th prince, according to your highness's opinion, who should we find? Jiang Chao asked tentatively. Didn't the new batch of beauties enter the palace? Xianli looked at his fingertips. There will always be people who want to climb up. You should find an opportunity and choose well. Jiang Chao was shocked and immediately lowered his head, respectfully replying, yes. After hearing the news of Jiang Ruan's marriage, it was obvious that there was more than one person in a bad mood. At this moment, in the Eastern Palace, Lu Min, who was standing in the garden pavilion, looked gloomily at the koi fish swimming in the pond. His thoughts had already flown to the highest heavens. The Empress Dowager's decree and the Emperor's vast grace had doomed him to no longer have any possibility. Thinking that Jiang Ruan would henceforth be crowned as part of the Shao family, Lu Min's heart welled up with a sour feeling. He was a complete bookworm, self-righteous and virtuous. For the first 20 years, he had never known the taste of love. By the time he understood his own feelings, it was already too late. However, Jiang Ruan's relationship with Xiao Xiao was not shallow. The two of them were so close. Receiving the Empress Dowager's decree, she must also be happy. As he was lost in thought, his shoulder was suddenly patted. Lu Min turned around and saw the Crown Prince's mischievous smiling face. Grand Tutor Lu, what are you thinking about? Lu Min shook his head. Your Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince indifferently sat down at the side and glanced at him. You are grieving for Hong and Junju. Lu Min was startled. A woman's reputation should not be casually violated. Just as he was about to deny it, he heard the Crown Prince say, You don't need to deny it, Grand Tutor Lu. In terms of history, I am inferior to you, but in matters of love, you are inferior to me. He rested his chin on one hand and looked at Lu Min curiously. In fact, I feel that it is very strange. This Hong and Junju, to put it bluntly, is only slightly better looking. Why do you all seem to be bewitched? Forget about Xiao Xiao, that cold man, but Grand Tutor, who does not understand romance, is also grieving for him. This is truly an eye-opener. Lu Min moved his lips, but did not know how to refute the Crown Prince's words. The Crown Prince's words were not wrong. Now that he was depressed, he was even less in the mood to argue with the Crown Prince. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he restrained himself and only said to the Crown Prince, No matter what, a few days ago, Your Highness the Crown Prince stood up for Hong and Junju. This official thanks Your Highness the Crown Prince for lending a helping hand. Forget it, I did not do it just for you. The Crown Prince waved his hand. Although Lu Min had previously begged him to think of a way to help Jiang Ruan, the Crown Prince had never been one to meddle in other people's business. He was even happy to watch the excitement. If it were not for Xian Pei's appearance, he would not have gotten involved in this mess. Xian Pei had asked him that day if he wanted to take revenge on the fourth prince, Xian Lang, who had betrayed him. The Crown Prince was already very angry at Xian Lang's overt obedience but covert opposition. He had been worried that he would not be able to find an excellent opportunity to teach him a lesson. Once he heard Xian Lang's words, he was somewhat tempted. Xian Lang then used a roundabout way to talk about the benefits that the Crown Prince could obtain. This successfully aroused the Crown Prince's playful heart. Immediately, he and Xian Pei hit it off and put on such a good show. Until now, the Crown Prince still found it strange that Xian Pei, a prince who did not make any noise in the palace, could come up with so many ideas. That nuisance of Jin Ling's divine physician, Xia Qing, was not someone that just anyone could invite. However, Xian Pei had said that as long as there was any medical expertise in the palace, Xia Qing would agree to enter the palace. As expected, back then, the Crown Prince could not understand how Xian Pei could predict things so accurately. Now that he thought about it, it was probably all thanks to Xiao Xiao. In the end, Xian Pei was only a child. At this age, it was still too early for him to be scheming and shrewd. For him to be so thorough, it must have been Xiao Xiao's orders. Although Lu Min was grateful to him, in reality, the Crown Prince did not help because of Lu Min. Now, seeing Lu Min's restless appearance, the Crown Prince felt some sympathy. Although Lu Min was usually very harsh and annoying, he was still a straightforward grand tutor. Seeing him so depressed because of a woman, the crown prince, in any case, had a teacher-student relationship. Seeing him so depressed because of a woman, the crown prince patted Lu Min's shoulder. Grand tutor, there is no need to be too sad. There are millions of women in the world. Why should you take one? Before long, she will be someone else's wife. Grand tutor is familiar with etiquette. Why don't we find a few lovely women for you? Although they will not be as beautiful as Hong and Junju, they will not disappoint. Lu Min's body stiffened. He hurriedly stood and said, "This subject appreciates your highness's good intentions, but this subject does not have such intentions. This subject still has some matters to attend to. This subject will take his leave." Finished speaking, he saluted and left as if fleeing. The crown prince spat out the tea residue in his mouth and said, "Boring." As for Jinying Wang Fu, it was different from the gloomy atmosphere in other places. It was almost as if they were happily preparing for the new year. Ever since the old Jinying Wang and his wife passed away, Jinying Wang Fu had been cold and cheerless all year round. It was rare for the entire Fu to be filled with joy. Today, when Empress Dowager Ida's imperial edict came down, everyone in the Fu rushed to spread the news. Even the brocade guards scattered throughout the great Jin dynasty received the messenger pigeons and began to gather money to buy wedding gifts for their masters and young madam. Steward Lin happily wiped his western glasses with a cloth and put them on his face. He pulled Jin Si aside and said, "Do you think this time's wedding invitation should be gilded or embroidered with natural silk?" After thinking for a while, he shook his head. "Why don't we make it into sandalwood skewers? We can stick beads on them. Last time, we brought back a batch of colored glass beads from Persia. If we stick them on, they will shine brightly and appear especially rich and festive." "This is better." Jin Si rolled his eyes. "Old Lin, do you need to make a wedding invitation so exquisite? If old madam is still here and sees you squandering like this, she will definitely regret letting you become a steward. What do you know, little girl?" Steward Lin hated it when people questioned his ability. He immediately puffed out his chest and said proudly, "This wedding invitation, if it's not done well, it will be a disgrace to the Fu. What is our master doing? He is marrying a wife, marrying a wife. In the beginning, many people said that our master would never be able to marry a wife in this lifetime. We are going to slap those people's faces. We want to make this marriage grand and dignified. Besides, do you think that this bit of money for the wedding invitation is squandering? Shao Si, old Lin, let me tell you, the betrothal gift that young master has decided to give is squandering." Jin Si's eyes brightened when he heard that. Before she could speak, a series of whooshing noises could be heard from the top of the tree. Jin San flew down with a leap. He looked at caretaker Lin and inquired excitedly, "How much is the betrothal gift? Take a guess." Steward Lin did not say for a long time, leaving the two in suspense. 49/7. Jin Si guessed. Jin Si's temperament was similar to that of a man. He was not very clear about these dowries and betrothal gifts, so he casually gave a number. "Pa, 49 to dismiss a beggar?" Jin San shook his head and said, "For women, the more betrothal gifts, the more impressive it is. I guess it's 9/981. Although Jin San was more like a woman than Jin Si, he was still a genie guard. These matters that normal women would know and care about were still lacking. Steward Lin looked at the two resentfully. "I didn't think that in your eyes, my Jinying Wang Fu is so shabby. What 9/981? It's a total of 168. 168? Jin San and Jin Si exclaimed in unison. Jin San frowned. "How much is that?" "I'll tell you frankly. 168 betrothal gifts are enough to buy the entire property of 3 Shangshu's manors and still have more than enough." Steward Lin said, "But it's only betrothal gifts. According to young master's temperament, in the future when young madam marries, the entire Jinying Wang Fu will belong to her. Sigh, master has grown up and can't be kept at home. He only cares about his wife and doesn't care about us servants. Towards the end, Steward Lin's tone became sad. The betrothal gifts of the three Shangshu's manors could not be said to be not rich. Jean San and Jean Si looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Jean San swallowed his saliva and said, "So many betrothal gifts, master didn't think of giving them all to the Shangshu's manors?" Steward Lin shook his head, "Stupid. How can so many betrothal gifts be sent to the Shangshu's manors? Of course, they will all be handed to young madam for safekeeping. Don't worry about this, young master has already made preparations. Young master is too manly." Jean San blinked. "If I were a woman, I would also be willing to marry him." "Aren't you a woman?" Steward Lin said disdainfully, "But young master doesn't like you. You're not as pretty as young madam." At this time, Steward Lin was still wrangling with Jean San and Jean Si, but he did not know that Jiang Yuan had already openly stepped into Jinying Wang Fu from the main entrance. The servants of Jinying Wang Fu did not even inform Steward Lin. Each and every one of them welcomed their future young master with extraordinary enthusiasm, leading the way and introducing her to others. Along the way, all the servants they met treated her with respect. Each and every one of them saluted and called her "young madam" louder than anything else, causing Lu Zhu to cover her mouth and snicker. After the messenger brought Jiang Yuan to Xiao Xiao's study, the servants consciously retreated. Lu Zhu and Tianzhu also considerately closed the door, leaving some alone time for the two people who had received the Empress's decree to bestow marriage. "Xiao Xiao, what do you want to do?" Jiang Yuan asked. Xiao Xiao's actions were so fast that it caught people unprepared. Now, she had been caught off guard and had been tied onto the boat that was Jinying Wang Fu. Xiao Xiao turned around. Today, he was not wearing the black clothes that he usually wore. Instead, he was wearing a dark red robe with a white python embroidered on the collar. He appeared to be a bit gentler than he had been in the past. He was even more elegant and peerless. His pair of starry eyes shone brightly, as if one would drown in them if they looked at them a few more times. He looked deeply at Jiang Yuan and said, "You're not happy. Now, the entire capital is saying that this good cabbage has been taken by me. Do you think that I can be happy?" This was the first time that Jiang Yuan had such obvious emotions towards him. Xiao Xiao's eyes flashed with a trace of a smile, and, "I'll let you take me." Such a gentle attitude made one simply not know what to say. Jiang Yuan glared at him for a while. "Are you very proud of yourself now?" "I'm very happy." Xiao Xiao approached her and whispered. He was born tall, so when he came so close, Jiang Yuan could only reach his chest. From a distance, it looked as if he was going to embrace her in his arms. His tone carried a pampering and gentleness that even he himself had not noticed. His voice had an indescribable magnetism. "Wang Fei." Jiang Yuan took a step back and kept a distance from him. What exactly was this person trying to do by using the seduction tactic of a handsome man, regardless of the time and place? It had to be said that this tactic was indeed very effective. Xiao Xiao smiled faintly, and his tone carried an inexplicable bewitchment. Immediately, he became as romantic as jade, different from his previous cold and elegant demeanor. "Why are you in such a hurry to bestow the marriage?" Jiang Yuan frowned. "You're leaving." Xiao Xiao lowered his eyes and looked at her. "Yes, I will leave in 10 days. Before that, I must settle down with you to avoid unnecessary complications." What did he mean by settle down? These words were somewhat inexplicable, but at the moment, Jiang Yuan could not care about this, so she said, "In 10 days? Time is pressing, and there are many people in the court who are eyeing you covetously. The Empress Dowager has ordered that after I leave, you will move into the Jinying Wang Fu. After returning to the court, you will get married." Xiao Xiao said in a low voice, "The Jinying Wang Fu can guarantee your safety. Getting married is just an expedient measure. Don't worry, I will help you. After getting married, I will not force you." At this point, Xiao Xiao's handsome face was slightly red, but his expression was as calm as ever. Jiang Yuan was already much calmer than him. She looked at him and said, "Okay. With Xiao Xiao's arrogant temperament, she was not some outstanding beauty, so Xiao Xiao would not go so far as to use force. On this point, Jiang Ruan was completely at ease. After thinking this through, she felt that her relationship with Xiao Xiao was not as awkward as before. If she could treat him as a friend or superior who could help her, that would not be too bad. She hung her head in contemplation and did not speak. Xiao Xiao looked at her thoughtfully, pursed his lips, and suddenly said, "But once you enter the Jinying Wangfu, you are my, Xiao Xiao's woman. If there are any troublemakers, you do not need to pay attention to them, just beat them out." After a pause, he said, "Lu Min, Xian Pei, and Gu Yi, you also do not need to pay attention to them." Jiang Ruan stared blankly and was momentarily speechless. She seemed to feel that her face was slightly hot. In her heart, she thought that although Xiao Xiao seemed cold and detached, he always had a way to make their relationship incomparably awkward. Chapter 161. What is Yinyang saying? Jiang Su smiled slightly. She was used to acting like a fairy, but now she had added a bit of charm. Every time she raised her hand or bowed her head, people could not help but look at her. She said, "I only heard that when Yinyang first entered the Fu, father loved you very much. Yinyang was also born with an outstanding beauty, causing many people in the capital to come to the Fu's gate to admire you. Now that I think about it, many years have passed since that grand occasion. Yinyang is still so young, even pregnant with a little brother, and even more charming than before. It is really admirable, no wonder father dotes on you so much. It is best that Yinyang is willing to help me." Jiang Su smiled. "I am infatuated with Xiao Wangya, but the position of the main wife is now occupied by Jijia. Su has never vainly thought of competing with Jijia, as long as I can have a place by Xiao Wangya's side. Even being a concubine doesn't matter." Hongying secretly cursed Jiang Su for being so cunning. She had gone around in a circle, but in the end, she still needed her help. However, Hongying also wanted to hear what Jiang Su was planning. If the gains did not make up for the losses, she naturally would not wade into these muddy waters. If there was some kind of trick, it was not impossible to do a favor at little cost. Thinking of this, Hongying relaxed her expression and said softly, "Second miss, you are flattering me. I wonder how second miss wants me to help you." "My good miss, it is not that I do not want to help you." Hongying sighed. "It is just that second miss's request is too difficult. Master loves second miss dearly, how can he be willing to let you be a concubine and have to look at others' faces? Second miss, if you do this, where will the face of the entire minister's Fu be placed? Although these words have crossed the line, I still have to say this. Second miss, as long as you have the Jiang family in your heart, you cannot have such thoughts." Hearing these words, Hongying was extremely pleased, and one of her hands involuntarily stroked her lower abdomen. In fact, there was no child there, but now, as long as she said there was a child there, there was a child. In this Jiang Fu, she was the sole ruler. Jiang Quan was already firmly in her hands, and he firmly believed in her words. Even on the day of childbirth, the preparations were done and the child was born smoothly. In the future, he would also be the young master of this mansion. However, the thoughts of the royal family were not so easy to guess. The emperor's intentions were hard to fathom. On the contrary, the young ladies and young wives of the great Jin dynasty were the most simple-minded. Not a single one of them did not feel that it was a pity that such a charming and handsome man like Xiao Xiao had only married the daughter of the minister of state. After she finished speaking, Jiang Su's tears trickled down her face. Yinyang, if there was even the slightest way, Su wouldn't have ended up like this. No one is born willing to be someone's concubine. Moreover, Su grew up in the mansion in luxury, so she naturally knew that this was something shameful to say. But Su really only wants Prince. If she can't marry him, then she can't marry anyone else in the future. Su also tried to forget him from her heart, but in the end, she found that it was impossible. Now that I have come to find Yinyang, it is precisely because Su has no other way out that I have come up with this plan. I only hope that Inyang can see Su Su's pitiful state and save Su Su's life. The more Hong Ying listened, the more she felt that it was ridiculous. After some deliberation, she opened her mouth to ask, since second miss also knows that the fate between the two of you has come to an end, it is better to set your mind at ease. Choosing another husband may not necessarily be a bad marriage. Become a concubine? Hong Ying cried out involuntarily. The dignified daughter of the Minister of State had become someone else's concubine. If word got out, people would laugh their teeth off. This Jiang Su Su's love for Xiao Xiao was so deep that she could even tolerate the matter of lowering her status to become a concubine. But even if she could tolerate it, Jiang Quan would certainly not allow it. Thinking of this, Hong Ying laughed. Now that I see second miss becoming more and more moving and beautiful, this concubine is also dumbfounded. I have let second miss see a joke. Xia Yan had not yet died, so she could not rashly abolish her own wife. However, by promoting Hong Ying to a second wife, in this mansion, it was almost equivalent to her covering the sky with one hand. This was exactly what Hong Ying wanted. Xia Yan was merely carrying an empty title, so there was nothing to fear. Jiang Quan would never again trust a woman who had lost her chastity. Hong Ying smiled with satisfaction, then patted Jiang Su Su's hand. Second miss is really considerate. However, as second miss said just now, I do not know how you want this concubine to help. Second miss has flattered this concubine. This concubine is only a concubine, how can I be worthy of the word graceful? On the contrary, second miss, Hong Ying said meaningfully. Seeing that you have grown so beautiful, this concubine believes that in the entire capital, there is not a second person as outstanding as you. In the future, it can be assumed that you will be able to marry into a good family. At that time, you will be able to live in luxury and be pampered in the palm of your hand. That would be boundless glory and endless grace. Jiang Quan had been born with a good appearance, and the children of the Jiang Fu had all inherited the good looks of the Jiang family. Of the three daughters of the Jiang family, Jiang Ruan was bright and beautiful, Jiang Su Su was elegant to the bone, and although Jiang Dan's appearance was slightly inferior, she was fresh and clever. However, from Hong Ying's experience, she had always seen that although men said that they liked a woman like Jiang Su Su, who did not eat the food of the common people, in their hearts, they always liked brightly colored women. Therefore, Jiang Ruan's appearance was the most flattering, but it was also easy to be gaudy. The more Hong Ying looked at it, the more she felt that if Jiang Su Su and Jiang Ruan entered Jinying Wang Fu, in the end, it would be Jiang Ruan who would be neglected, and Jiang Su Su who would be favored. Now that Jiang Su Su's biological mother's power was gone, if she wanted to live well in the Fu, she would have to rely on her. Now, it seemed that this Jiang Su Su was also tactful, and was much easier to manipulate than Jiang Ruan. She had an idea in her heart, but in the end, this help was not in vain. Hong Ying said awkwardly, "This second miss is infatuated, and this concubine has also come from a female family, so I understand second miss's thoughts. It's just that this matter looks simple, but it is not easy to sit down. If I mess it up, master will punish me. Second miss is the young miss of the Fu's wife, so naturally, there is nothing wrong with it. However, this concubine is only a Inyang, and if I make master unhappy, he may sweep this concubine out of the door. Other things are fine, but this concubine is currently pregnant with a child. I do not want this child to be punished once it is born, and become a child without a status." These words were a little too much. How could the gates of Jinying Wang Fu be entered so easily? Earlier, there had been a senior official in the court who had revealed that the emperor had the intention of marrying the daughter of the governor of Binhai, Yao family, to Xiao Xiao. What kind of person was that Miss Yao? She was probably able to match the strength of a country's princess. The emperor valued Xiao Xiao so much, so how could she, a mere daughter of a minister, enter the emperor's eyes? This time, if Jiang Ruan had not been appointed by Empress Dowager Ida, it was assumed that she would not have had a chance. The implication in these words was almost naked, and Jiang Su Su was not a fool. She immediately said, "Inyang does not need to worry, I still hope that Inyang can help me with this matter." After this matter is completed, in order to repay Yin Yang's kindness, Su Su will personally intercede with father and grandparents, open the ancestral shrine, and ask father to promote Yin Yang to a wife of equal rank. Yin Yang? Jiang Su Su saw Hong Ying's infatuation, and a trace of disdain flashed in her eyes. Then, a light smile blossomed on her face, like a dewy white lotus flower in the early morning of the mountains. The flower buds trembled and trembled, making people's hearts itch. Now, both men and women were attracted to her. She looked at Hong Ying, her eyes sparkling. Moreover, didn't Yin Yang also say that? Although Su Su is not as beautiful as Jijia, she is not without merit, and may not necessarily be unable to gain Xiao Wangye's favor in the future. If Wangye is happy, he can promote Su Su. Su Su and De Jijia are both people of the Fu, sisters working together for the same husband. It will be a wonderful story. She reached out to hold Hong Ying's hand, and her tone was full of pleading. I beg Yin Yang to help Su Su. If Su Su is lucky enough to gain Wangye's favor in the future, he will certainly remember Yin Yang's kindness today. A sincere smile floated on her face, and when she looked at Jiang Su Su again, she was somewhat satisfied. This second miss now seemed to be tactful. Previously, she had also experienced Xia Yan's methods. Now that Xia Yan had fallen, Jiang Su Su was not rushing to curry favor with her. Hong Ying felt a sense of glory. Jiang Su Su looked at Hong Ying with grief. That look was like a ray of light, and it made people feel as if they were watching a snake beauty slowly twisting, and they were unable to look away. Yin Yang also doesn't believe me. Jiang Su Su sighed faintly. When she frowned, her eyes seemed to be covered by a layer of mist, making people feel as if they were looking at flowers in the fog. When they wanted to see clearly, they would sink into the deep pool within. Those light-colored lips were plump and small, and it was clearly the action of speaking, but it could also make people's mouths and tongues go dry. Hong Ying's eyes flashed. Originally, this matter had nothing to do with her, and she should not have gotten involved, but Jiang Su Su's words just now had somewhat tempted her. In the past, she really only wanted to pass her days peacefully in the Fu. When Xia Yan was around, she was cautious, for fear of being caught. Although she had been doted on by Jiang Quan for so many years, she had still lived cautiously. Now that Xia Yan was no longer in the Fu, and second Yin Yang had died, De Yin Yang was not to be feared. In this Fu, she was the sole ruler. Once a person had tasted the taste of power, it was not so easy to let go. Although Jiang Ruan had helped her, Jiang Quan and Jiang Ruan were sworn enemies. If she wanted to firmly hold her position in the Fu, she could not have any further involvement with Jiang Ruan. Recently, Jiang Su Su had become more and more elegant, and within this elegance, there was a trace of faintly discernible charm. Unlike Jiang Ruan's charming and gorgeous facial features, Jiang Su Su's charm was in her every movement, as if she was a young married woman who had already been moisturized. There was a kind of irresistible allure. Even 15-young Hong Ying, who had come from a brothel, could not help but be slightly absent-minded when she saw Jiang Su Su's manner of speaking. Jiang Su Su lowered her head and stood up. In a soft voice, she said, "This. I would like to ask Yin Yang to take a look. Later, Su Su will look for Yin Yang to discuss in detail." As she finished speaking, she ordered the servant beside her to hand over a letter. Hong Ying took the letter, glanced at Jiang Su Su, and smiled. "Of course. Your servant's body is not feeling well, so I won't send you off." After walking out of Hong Ying's courtyard, Jiang Su Su stopped at the entrance of the garden. Looking at the courtyard gate, she slowly revealed a cold smile. She was merely a lowly prostitute, yet she still wanted to fly up the branches and become a phoenix. Even if she wanted to be the Jiang Fu's second wife, she still needed to see if she had the qualifications. As for Jiang Ruan, a trace of resentment flashed in Jiang Su Su's eyes. She was merely a rough girl who had been raised in a rural village. What right did she have to marry into the luxurious Jinying Wang Fu? As long as that Xiao Xiao was not a fool, he would not let her choose Jiang Ruan. Jiang Su Su gently caressed her cheeks. Now that she had perfected her art of seduction, all the men in this world would prostrate themselves before her pomegranate skirt. She wanted to compete with Jiang Yuan. Anything that Jiang Yuan valued, anything that Jiang Yuan possessed, she would snatch it, even if it was her husband. Honging only returned to her senses after being called, and she could not help but feel a trace of alarm in her heart. She thought of the Fu's second miss staying in the courtyard every day, and did not know what she was doing. Now that Jiang Chao's official position had gradually risen, and he had regained Jiang Quan's trust, she could no longer make things difficult for Jiang Su Su. Moreover, Jiang Quan had also told her that Hong Ying and Jiang Su Su's relationship was still peaceful. However, today, Jiang Su Su had unexpectedly come to her courtyard to sit for a while. It was only then that Hong Ying discovered that the scars on Jiang Su Su's face had completely disappeared, and she looked even more amorous than before. There was no reason for a man to not dote on such a woman. Even if that Xiao Xiao was made of stone, when faced with such a beauty, his heart would still be moved. In the end, men were merely animals that followed their instincts. This second Mrs. methods were so powerful that it would not be a difficult task for her to capture that legendary cold-hearted and aloof young prince in the palm of her hand. On the other hand, although Jiang Ruan's appearance was bright and beautiful, if one thought about it carefully, her temperament was too cold and austere. Men all liked warm and fragrant jade, and women should show weakness. Jiang Ruan was so strong, how could she compare to a drop of Jiang Su Su's tear? Yinyang should take good care of the fetus. Su Su will take her leave first. Jiang Su Su finished speaking, nodded to Hong Ying, and walked towards the outside of the courtyard. Hong Ying sized up the woman in front of her. Jiang Su Su's white clothes were refined, yet they emitted a kind of charm, like the charm of a fox spirit. Her every movement almost dazzled people's eyes. This was different from the beauty of her appearance, it was a kind of amorous feeling that was engraved in the bones. Even though Hong Ying had stayed in the brothel for so many years, seeing Jiang Su Su's current demeanor, she could not help but exclaim in her heart, "Good." If Jiang Su Su had been born many years earlier, it was likely that the red card in the brothel would have been replaced. Now, it seemed that Jiang Su Su still had that unpowdered appearance, but inexplicably had a somewhat seductive look in her eyes. Even she could not help but be attracted. Although Hong Ying did not understand, she also put away her contempt for Jiang Su Su. However, she also put away her contempt towards Jiang Su Su. With such beauty and charm, coupled with some flirtatious methods, as long as Jiang Su Su made good use of her body, she would be able to easily obtain everything she wanted in the future. The sudden arrival of the Empress Dowager's decree was like a sudden clap of thunder. Those who were related to this matter began to speculate about the Empress Dowager's intentions. Those who thought further ahead thought that it was because Xiao Xiao was becoming more and more presumptuous. The dignity of the royal family could not be violated. Empress Dowager Ida bestowing Jiang Yuan to him might be a good thing for others, but for Xiao Xiao, who already carried the name of a rebel and traitor, it was a hot potato. Some people said that this was a warning from the royal family to Jin Wang, but those who looked further ahead thought that the Empress Dowager was paving the way for Jin Wang. It must be known that if Jiang Xing was fine at the front line and returned to the court, the relationship between these two would be even more intimate, and they would be an irresistible force in the great Jin court. Hong Ying was startled. She had never expected that Jiang Su Su would reveal such a secret in front of her. Hong Ying acknowledged that Jiang Su Su's relationship was not close enough to the point where she could share a girl's worries. Jiang Su Su was also not a one-track-minded person who would casually trust others. There must be a reason for this. Not only did Hong Ying not relax, but she also became vigilant. She put on a fake smile and said, "Second Mrs. words are true. Don't take your own reputation as a joke." Hong Ying did her best to suppress the impatience in her heart and looked away. She only heard Jiang Su Su say, "Yinyang, it's fine if you don't believe me." As early as 3 years ago, on the day of the Lantern Festival on Ling Long Boat, after Xiao Wanye helped Su Su out of her predicament, I have been wholeheartedly devoted to him. Originally, I thought that since I could not become his wife, it would be good to look at him from afar. I did not expect that by a freak combination of factors, he would unexpectedly become my brother-in-law. Hong Ying's heart skipped a beat. It turned out that she was jealous of not being able to eat grapes and had poured out sour water. However, now that she was pouring out her grievances in front of her, she could not help but say a few words of consolation. She immediately smiled and said, "Second miss, you must not belittle yourself. Eldest miss is just lucky." To put it bluntly, how can second miss's talent and appearance be inferior to eldest miss's? If it were not for the arranged marriage, based on second miss's qualifications, it would not be impossible for her to enter Jinying Wang's fu. Jiang Su Su sneered in her heart, but her tone became increasingly low. "Thank you, Yin Yang, for your consolation. Su Su knows that her status is low, and she is far from eldest sister's graceful bearing and appearance. I have never dreamed of marrying into Jinying Wang's fu as a Wangfei like eldest sister. It's just that." At this point, her voice slightly choked with sobs, and the rims of her eyes reddened. Looking at her expression, it did not seem like she was faking it. She said, "It's just that a long time ago, Su Su regarded Jinying Wang as her sweetheart. She only hoped to be able to look at him from afar. I did not expect that now, even this dream cannot be allowed to continue for Su Su." When this news reached the minister's fu, Hong Ying was talking to Jiang Su Su. She always wanted to be the final winner. "Yin Yang must be joking," Jiang Su Su sighed and said with a gloomy expression, "Today, mother is seriously ill, father is busy with court affairs every day, and Yin Yang is pregnant. It is not good for grandparents to interfere in Su Su's affairs. Who in this fu still remembers Su Su?" She wiped away the tears that were about to fall from the corners of her eyes and said in a low voice, "Moreover, Su Su does not have eldest sister's good fortune, to have the Empress Dowager's arranged marriage, to be able to marry Jinying Wang, Xiao Wangye, who is like a celestial being. Moreover, Jiang Ruan was a very scheming person, and she could not be controlled by her." By now, Hong Ying was already used to the days of bossing people around. How could she be willing to be inferior in front of Jiang Ruan? More importantly, Jiang Ruan knew her secret. This was like an unpredictable scourge that was always hidden in Hong Ying's heart, and every night, she was unable to sleep peacefully. If she could send Jiang Su Su into Jinying Wang's fu and build a good relationship with Jiang Su Su, perhaps she could restrain Jiang Ruan a little. At least, Jiang Ruan would not dare to act blindly without thinking. Chapter 162. Empress Dowager Ida's decree to bestow marriage could not be said to be insignificant. Even though Xiao Xiao was about to go to war, the marriage had already been decided. It was just that Jiang Ruan was not yet out of mourning, so she could not bow to the heaven and earth. Nominally, she was still Xiao Xiao's woman. The common people naturally could not see the intricacies of the various relationships. They could only secretly envy the good fortune of the minister's fu that a daughter could marry into Jinying Wang fu. Although this Jinying Wang's reputation was not very good, how could the common people understand this? Just by looking at the surface, they can see that this so-called rebel and traitor Xiao Wangye is actually a delicious cake in the court. Xiao Xiao was the first to have such power at such a young age. Scholar Jiang Shang's 3 daughters were all beautiful like flowers and the moon. Although the eldest daughter had been raised in the manner since she was a child, she couldn't stop herself from being outstanding. Later on, she ran into some kind of good luck and became a Junju. Now, she could be considered to have married into a high position. The status of the minister's residence would definitely rise along with the tide. With Jiang Ruan's example, people could not help but ponder about Jiang Su Su's future. To tell the truth, Jiang Su Su had always been known as a peerless beauty in the capital city, and her talent had spread far and wide. If Xia Yan had not met with this mishap, it was likely that the people proposing marriage would have broken down the doorstep. It was just that she had a mother with a bad reputation, so Jiang Su Su was somewhat implicated. Respectable families did not take a liking to her, and there were those who coveted her beauty. Jiang Quan did not take a liking to her family background. Over and over again, her marriage was delayed. No matter what, it was the Empress Dowager's decree. No matter how sullen and displeased Jiang Quan felt, he had to put on a happy face. Not only that, but he had to do it so that no one could find any fault with it. Empress Dowager Ida's people were watching, so how could he do anything? Fortunately, he still had a Jeyu flower in this manner. Hong Ying agreed to all of Jiang Ruan's marriage arrangements. She helped to arrange everything inside and out. In addition, with the assistance of De Yinyang, there was no lack of etiquette. Because of this, Jiang Quan was very satisfied with Hong Ying. Because Hong Ying was still pregnant with the flesh and blood of the Jiang family, he was even more considerate and attentive to her. Hong Ying was truly considerate of Jiang Ruan. Ever since the Empress Dowager had issued the Empress Dowager's edict, Xiao Xiao had yet to pay a visit to the Jiang Fu. In terms of etiquette, it wasn't right, but Xiao Xiao didn't have parents, so it was impossible for his parents to do it for him. With Xiao Xiao's temperament, he felt that it was impossible for him to personally make the trip. If Xiao Xiao really did not show up, with Jiang Quan's rank, he would not dare to easily say anything to him. When Hong Ying brought up this matter, while straightening Jiang Quan's collar, she said, "In any case, Xiao Wangye will eventually come to our fu. This concubine thinks that whether Xiao Wangye will come or not, the etiquette must be thorough. Why not send an invitation to him and invite him to the mansion? Why don't we talk about first Miss marriage?" As soon as he thought of this marriage, Jiang Quan felt a headache coming on. Unfortunately, this was a marriage that he could not afford to offend. He replied stiffly, "Do as you see fit. This matter should have been done by Furen." Hong Ying lowered her head. However, Furen is currently recuperating in the manor, so it would not be good to trouble her. I only hope that Xiao Wangye will not despise this concubine for having a low birth and think that it is a disgrace to him. What lowly? As soon as Xia Yan was mentioned, Jiang Quan thought of all those bad things, and his mood became even worse. At once, his tone was not very pleasant as he said, "Now, you are the mistress of the fu. He, Xiao Xiao, wants to marry my family's daughter, but Jiang Ruan still occupies the Jiang name, so he must abide by our Jiang family's rules. You can go ahead and send the invitation. It doesn't matter if he doesn't come. After all, word will spread that he is the one who does not know etiquette. Even if this matter were to be reported to the Empress Dowager, he would still be the one in the wrong. Leoi, don't be angry." Hong Ying gently advised, "Xiao Wangye is not a person who does not know etiquette. This concubine will go and make arrangements. In a few days, if Xiao Wangye is willing to visit, this concubine hopes that I can serve you well. After all, first Miss marriage cannot be neglected, and the Empress Dowager will also personally oversee it. It's only a trivial matter, no need to worry too much." Jiang Ruan frowned, as if she was very unwilling to hear any news about Jiang Ruan. Turning around, she warned Hong Ying, "If you have the leisure time, why don't you worry more about Susu's marriage? Seeing that Susu is about to be married, you are the one attending all the social engagements in the fu. Inquire more about the youths of suitable age in the capital, and choose a good marriage for Susu." "Yes, Leoi." A smile floated on Hong Ying's face, but in her heart, she secretly mocked that Jiang Quan's efforts would be wasted. Jiang Su was not someone who was easy to deal with. There was no need to think about that talented young man. Jiang Su now wholeheartedly wanted to climb into her brother-in-law's bed. However, now it was convenient for her to act. When the Jiang Fu's invitation was handed over to Xiao Xiao, Steward Lin paid special attention to Xiao Xiao's expression. Seeing that Xiao Xiao did not show any signs of movement, he could not help but remind, "Young master, do you accept this invitation or not? What's the difference?" Xiao Xiao sat down in front of the table. In front of him was a map of the territory outside the city of Tianjin, which was full of markings. The expedition was imminent. This time, the operation was complicated and there was a fear of changes. Everything had to be prepared. My master, this is very different." Steward Lin anxiously said, "Although this is the Empress Dowager's decree, young Furen is destined to be the female mistress of our fu. However, this ostentation cannot be ignored. If Furen is still here, she should be going to the minister's fu to see her daughter-in-law and have a chat with her in-laws. However, we can't find such a person in our fu. Young master, it's best if you personally go. Seeing Xiao Xiao raise his eyes to look at him, Steward Lin spoke with even more vigor. If you go, what does that mean? It means that young master values young Furen. Now that young Furen is in the minister's fu, others will look up to her and not dare to easily bully her. Young master, this old servant will say something. This woman needs to be coaxed. Young master, do you think that young Furen is not warm enough to you? This is young master's fault. Men always need to take the initiative. Young master, this time, you are going to support young Furen. Seeing you like this, young Furen will definitely be moved. At this moment, young master, you can take the opportunity to say a few words to please her. Are you afraid that young Furen will not be dead set on you? Steward Lin's words could not be said not to have touched Xiao Xiao's heart. He frowned slightly and looked thoughtfully at the map in front of him, but his expression seemed to be thinking about something else. After a long moment of silence, he nodded and said, "Reply the invitation. In 3 days, Xiao Xiao will pay a visit." "All right." Steward Lin said beautiful words. Seeing that his young master was rarely so obedient, he was extremely gratified in his heart. He only secretly said that the child was worth teaching, and then eagerly went out to look for good invitations. Take the initiative. He lowered his head and muttered to himself. His eyelashes drew an intoxicating arc, but his eyes seemed to curve as he smiled. Jiang Ruan was completely unaware of the exchange of invitations between the ministers Fu and Jining Wang Fu. These few days in the Jiang Fu, it was a rare moment of leisure. She did not know whether Jiang Quan had specifically instructed them to, but the servants seemed to completely ignore the news of her and Xiao Xiao's engagement. They did not come forward to congratulate her, nor did they greet her, as if they were deliberately giving her the cold shoulder. Every time Bai Ji and Lian Xiao mentioned this matter, they would naturally have a belly full of anger. In the end, Jiang Ruan was also a daughter of the Jiang family. For Jiang Quan to actually take things to this extent was really somewhat despicable. As Lian Xiao combed Jiang Ruan's hair, she said, "I heard that for the past few days, Second Miss has been running to 15 Yang's courtyard every day, sitting there for the whole afternoon. I really don't know when the two of them had such a friendship. That 15 Yang is really one to burn the bridge after crossing the river. Now, she actually has a falling out with me. The Empress Dowager's decree has been passed down for so long, yet she has not come to ask about it. Even now, I don't know what to do with the dowry and the marriage." Originally, the matriarch of the household had to take care of these matters first. If Zhao Mei was still alive, she would have long been so busy these days that her chest would stick to her back. Hong Ying, on the other hand, was idle. Up until now, she had not asked about anything. She could not let her daughter, who was about to get married, ask about these matters herself. What wrong did she do? She could have said that she was only a concubine, and that it was not her place to interfere in the marriage of a daughter. Speaking of which, she was not in the wrong. Jiang Yuan said indifferently, if anything really happened, the Empress Dowager would not just stand by and watch. She saw this point clearly, so she deliberately did not ask about it. In any case, with Empress Dowager Ida's help, Hong Ying would not be willing to do things that were strenuous and unrewarding. Now that the power of managing the household had fallen into Hong Ying's hands, if Hong Ying really had to fork out money from the public purse for her dowry, Hong Ying would also be unwilling. After tasting the taste of power, how could she easily let it go? Hong Ying was used to the feeling of being high and mighty in the Fu. In the face of a daughter who was of a higher rank than herself, how could she be happy? In short, this 15 Yang is not kind. She doesn't even think about it. If it were not for Mrs. Help, would she be able to live peacefully in the Fu, let alone live such a life today? Does she really think that she is pregnant with? Lian Xiao, Jiang Ruan interrupted her, "You have said too much." Lian Xiao was stunned. Knowing that she had said something wrong, she hurriedly said, This servant has said something wrong. Jiang Yuan shook her head. It's nothing, just don't let anyone hear. Go to the palace and pick out a few bolts of cloth. Later, you and Bai Ji can embroider some pouches. These days, there are many people coming to the palace, so we cannot neglect the rewards. Ever since the Empress Dowager issued the marriage decree, Empress Dowager Ida had sent some things over from time to time, but they were all jewelry and cloth. Presumably, she felt that these things could be used as a girl getting married. However, Jiang Yuan herself did not care about these things. If Bai Ji and the others had not mentioned them from time to time, she feared that she would have directly thrown them into a box and never seen the light of day. Lian Xiao stuck out her tongue and went to pick out the cloth. Lu Zhu, who was embroidering at the side, blinked her eyes and asked, "Miss, when do you plan to start embroidering the wedding dress?" Wedding dress? Jiang Yuan was slightly startled. Naturally, it's the wedding dress. Lu Zhu propped up her cheeks and looked at her with a smile. Don't we always embroider the wedding dress before getting married? Even if the wedding date was postponed to next year, can we start embroidering the wedding dress now? Although Xiao Wangye may send someone to send it over, don't all girls like to embroider their own wedding dress? Xiao Wangye and Miss are both so beautiful. Just thinking about how you will look when you wear the wedding dress, this servant feels that it can dazzle the eyes of the entire capital. Her words were delicate and charming, but they caused Jiang Yuan to sink into deep thought. In her previous life, when she was sent to the palace, she naturally did not have the opportunity to become a bride. When she was a young girl, it was not that she had never imagined what she would look like when she wore a phoenix coronet and a red robe, but in her previous life, she had not been able to see that moment. She had never thought about the happiness of ordinary people. In this life, if Xiao Xiao had not requested this Empress Dowager's decree, she would not have thought about what it would be like to get married. If she were to marry someone else, perhaps she would still be able to treat them coldly. However, when the other party became Xiao Xiao, her heart felt somewhat strange. The wedding dress was embroidered for the beloved to wear. What position did Xiao Xiao have in her heart now? Jiang Yuan herself had never thought about it. It was probably beyond friendship, but they were not yet lovers, and were probably still a little bit away. But that little bit was separated by a deep knot in her heart, and she did not know whether she would ever be able to untie it in this lifetime. Thinking about it this way, she felt a faint sense of guilt toward Xiao Xiao. Let's talk about it when we have free time. She shook her head, but she was somewhat absent-minded. Lu Zhu saw that she was absent-minded, so she did not ask any more questions and obediently continued with the work at hand. Xiao Xiao really did come to the Jiangfu 3 days later. There was only him and housekeeper Lin. Xiao Xiao was dressed in an ink-black brocade robe with a floral scabbard embroidered on the collar with a thin green bamboo leaf embroidery. A dark golden qilin was still hooked on his wrist guard, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, appearing extremely formidable. When he entered the fu, his expression was indifferent, and his eyes were like cold stars, causing people to not dare to look directly at him. They only felt that his body carried a biting cold air, and his domineering aura was restrained, yet it was low and ostentatious in the dark. The maidservant who led the way blushed, but did not dare to raise her head to look at this young man's handsome facial features. From beginning to end, she lowered her head and led the way without saying a word. Along the way, all the maidservants and palace maids who passed by looked at him absent-mindedly. Naturally, housekeeper Lin was extremely proud, and she straightened her back with a proud expression. When he arrived at the main hall, he saw that Hong Ying and eldest Yang were already waiting for him. Hong Ying bowed to Xiao Xiao with the help of a maidservant, a cordial smile on her face. This concubine greets Wang Ye. Furen is currently not in the fu, so this lowly concubine helps to take care of the internal affairs. I hope that Wang Ye does not mind this concubine's rudeness. Xiao Xiao gave a faint sound, and sat down on the chair that had been prepared for him. Housekeeper Lin stood to one side, and without waiting for Xiao Xiao to speak, he said with a smile, 15 Yang does not need to be polite. Since it is young Furen's maiden family, it is not too much. Master does not have so many rules, just do as you please. Housekeeper Lin smiled amiably, but every word he said was not amiable at all. Although it was said that there were no rules, in fact, he was putting on airs that were bigger than anything else. Eldest Inyang stood to one side without saying a word, but the surrounding maidservants could see that the situation was not right. This master and servant of Jinying Wangfu did not come with good intentions. They were afraid that they had specially come to support eldest young Mississippi immediately. They lowered their heads even more, and only wanted to not attract attention. The smile on Hong Ying's face stiffened. In the end, she was born in the marketplace, so she was better at dealing with people. But in a short moment, she restored her amiable and natural smile. That could not be better. Eldest young miss is our Fu's daughter, so master is very distressed. Now seeing Wanya love eldest young miss so much, master will also be very happy to know. Xiao Xiao did not answer, so housekeeper Lin said, Furen's words are too polite. Since the Empress Dowager has issued a decree, young Furen is the female master of our Fu, so she must be loved by master. Today, in addition to this matter, master also ordered this old servant to send the betrothal gift list over. After young Furen marries into the family, the betrothal gift will be sent to young Furen together with the dowry. Empress Dowager has also taken a look at this. Finishing, he took out a gold silk patterned gift list from his sleeve and handed it over to Hong Ying. When Hong Ying first heard housekeeper Lin's words, her heart was happy, but when she heard the second half of his words, her face turned green. When she opened the betrothal gift list, her face turned from red to white, white to red. It could be said to be extremely wonderful. After a moment, she closed the gift list, took a deep breath, and said with a forced smile, Wang Ye really loves eldest young miss. This gift list can't be said to be not rich. Seeing this concubine is also sincerely happy for eldest young Mississippi. As she said this, her hand used a lot of strength, almost twisting the gift list into pieces. In fact, Hong Ying came from a brothel. What kind of place was a brothel? It was a place to squander money. What kind of wastrel had she not seen? Hong Ying had seen a lot of people spend a lot of money for a beautiful woman, so she was not as short-sighted as second Inyang when it came to gold, silver, and jewels. But now, seeing the betrothal gift list sent by Jinying Wangfu, she couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Rare treasures, rare beasts, houses and shops, gold and silver notes. Countless riches, countless jewels. Just a small betrothal gift list was enough to let people see the tip of the iceberg of riches in Jinying Wangfu. Even though Hong Ying could be considered experienced and knowledgeable, at this moment, she couldn't help but be dazzled by this riches and honor. In her heart, she was secretly jealous of Jiang Ruan. More importantly, this scalding riches and honor had flown away before she could even get her hands on them. Xiao Xiao's words were very clear. This betrothal gift was to be given to Jiang Ruan, and Empress Dowager Ida was also clear about it. This meant that she wouldn't even have the chance to intervene. Originally, she had wanted to fish for some benefits from Jiang Ruan's betrothal gift, but now, she had to watch this riches and honor slip away from her hands. It must be known that this betrothal gift alone was worth several manors. How could she be willing? The more unwilling she was, the more determined Hong Ying was to send Jiang Su to Jinying Wangfu. Jiang Ruan was not easy to grasp, but Jiang Su could distinguish who was in charge of the Jiang Fu. If she could control Jiang Su, when she entered Jinying Wangfu, this riches and honor would continuously flow into the minister's Fu. At that time, the days of the minister's Fu would become more and more comfortable. Hong Ying made up her mind, and her smile became a little more fervent. Only housekeeper Lin frowned and looked at the somewhat deformed gift list that Hong Ying was clutching and said, Inyang, be careful. There is only one copy of this gift list besides the Empress Dowager's. If it is damaged, I'm afraid it will be very troublesome. It was this concubine's carelessness. Hong Ying awkwardly smiled apologetically. Housekeeper Lin then said, I don't know where young madam is. She should come out and meet with Prince. Hong Ying smiled slightly. Eldest miss will naturally come out, but girls are always shy. I'm afraid that she is currently dressing up. Just now, this concubine has already sent someone to inform eldest miss that she will go to the tea hall in the garden. Lin Lang, bring Prince over first. You young people always have some things to talk about. Moreover, the Empress Dowager has just bestowed a marriage, so it is good to get to know each other earlier. Her words were astute and magnanimous, completely different from those pedantic aristocratic families. However, Xiao Xiao's expression did not change, and he continued to look at her indifferently. In the face of such an expressionless person, no matter how glib one's tongue was, one would still feel somewhat powerless. However, today, housekeeper Lin seemed to have specially come to speak up for Xiao Xiao. He immediately smiled and said, "That couldn't be any better. Please quickly lead the way." Nowadays, Jinying Wang Fu treated Xiao Xiao's marriage as a top priority. His master's skill in wooing a wife was not enough, so he naturally had to contribute as a subordinate. Housekeeper Lin always wished that he could create opportunities for Xiao Xiao and Jiang Yuan to be alone at all times. Housekeeper Lin was very satisfied that Hong Ying was so tactful. Housekeeper Lin has misunderstood. Hong Ying covered her lips and smiled. This concubine still has some matters regarding the wedding celebration to discuss with housekeeper Lin. Seeing that Wang Yi has also handed over the marriage to housekeeper Lin to manage, this concubine still wishes to have a good discussion with housekeeper Lin. If housekeeper Lin does not mind, then please stay here and discuss things with this concubine. She looked towards Xiao Xiao and said with a smile, "As for eldest young miss and Wang Yi, it will be more convenient for the two of you to talk." If he had not known that everyone in the Jiangfu was a shrewd person, housekeeper Lin would have almost praised Hong Ying as an educated and reasonable beauty. Nothing could be better for the two of them to be alone. When housekeeper Lin was young, he had followed the old Jinying Wang and had also learned to have an unruly and hedonistic temperament. He simply did not care about worldly laws. Therefore, in his eyes, the rules of the aristocratic families regarding men and women were all fleeting clouds. Moreover, now that Empress Dowager Ida had already decreed that Jiang Yuan would be the young madam, there was no need for the young madam and the young master to avoid arousing suspicion when they spoke. When a man and a woman stayed together, they needed to be alone. If they were alone a few more times, sparks would fly, and they might even get pregnant. That's also not bad. "Master, what do you think?" Housekeeper Lin looked towards Xiao Xiao inquiringly, his eyes full of expectation. Xiao Xiao did not disappoint housekeeper Lin's expectations and lightly nodded his head, "All right." Hong Ying's smile became more sincere. "Lin Lang, quickly lead Wang Yi over." Lin Lang obediently walked over and bowed towards Xiao Xiao. "Wang Yi, please follow this servant." Xiao Xiao followed Lin Lang through the Jiangfu's courtyard and flower terrace, bypassing a long corridor until they arrived at a tea hall in the garden. This tea hall was located in the middle of the forest, hidden under the trees, and the environment was quiet and secluded. If one was tired from staying here, they could go in to rest, sip some tea, and rest for a while. It was also an excellent place to stay. Thinking about it, it should be an extremely exquisitely renovated place in the Jiangfu. The area it occupied was also quite spacious. From afar, one would think that it was the courtyard of some family's daughter. Lin Lang did not speak along the way and only focused on leading the way. As a result, she ignored Xiao Xiao's gaze. His expression was calm, but he had already sized up the place without batting an eyelid. This was not the first time that Xiao Xiao had entered this Jiangfu. The previous few times he had had the opportunity to come here, he had almost completely figured out the ins and outs of the Jiangfu. Moreover, Jean Eyre and Jean San were keeping an eye on it. He had also seen the map of the Jiangfu presented to him, so he naturally knew that this was a tea hall. This tea hall was usually not used to entertain guests. On the contrary, although the environment was quiet and secluded, it was too far from the courtyards of the various womenfolk. Ever since Xia Yan had left, very few people had come here to drink tea. However, Hong Ying had arranged for him to meet Jiang Yuan in this place. Chapter 163. After Hong Ying brought Xiao Xiao to the door, she smiled and said, "This is the tea house. This servant will prepare some tea and snacks. Your Highness, please go in and rest. Eldest young miss will be here soon. Xiao Xiao did not say anything, so Honging bowed and retreated. Before leaving, she glanced at the carved door before picking up her skirt and leaving. After Honging left, Xiao Xiao thought for a long time before reaching out to push the door open. As soon as he pushed the door open, the room was filled with a faint sweet fragrance. This fragrance was very light and not strong. When he smelled it, he felt that it was the fragrance of a young girl. It was light and faint, but there was a hint of sweetness that caused an indescribable warmth to rise in his heart. It was not like incense, but like the fragrance of a body. Xiao Xiao raised his eyebrows and sat down in front of the table. On the table, there was an exquisite green jade wine pot with 2 or 3 jade cups. In the cup, there was a plate of sparkling and translucent purple grapes, each plump and smooth, like crystal beads. The hospitality here was so thoughtful. Why would there be a need for Lin Lang to prepare some tea and snacks? Not only that, the room was divided into 2 by a jadeite screen. The screen was extremely large, and the jadeite was also verdant. The top was carefully engraved with the 4 beauties, and the women were either dancing or painting poems, all of them vivid and lifelike. Behind the screen, the sound of water rippling could be heard. This sound was extremely soft. If Xiao Xiao had not practiced martial arts and had internal energy, he would not have been able to hear it. Now, it seemed that something had stirred up a shallow splash. The water gently fell, making a charming and gentle sound that caused one's heart to be filled with wild and fanciful thoughts. Xiao Xiao was unmoved. He only looked down at the pure white jade whistle at his fingertips, not knowing what he was thinking. He remained motionless. Time passed quietly in the room, but he did not see Jiang Ruan arrive. However, at this moment, the splash behind the screen suddenly became bigger, and there was another burst of rustling sounds. Xiao Xiao's eyes moved, and then, a slender figure appeared from behind the screen. It was a beautiful woman. She was clearly wearing a plain white dress, and there weren't many decorations on her clothes. There was only a wide green belt wrapped around the waist of her robe, which made her waist even more slender. Her movements were like a tender willow swaying in the wind, and she was enchanting everywhere. Her every move carried a seductive aura, but people couldn't help but be attracted to her. There were still water droplets on her body from the shower. The sparkling and translucent water droplets streaked across her sharp chin and slowly rolled down to her chest. The water droplets were covered by her robe, making one's heart itch even more. Looking up, it was clearly an elegant and refined face. Her facial features were exquisite, and her eyebrows and eyes were full of charm. She was like a pure fairy from the jade pool in heaven, born without knowing what the world was. Such a fairy's face, coupled with the seductive behavior of a prostitute, was a fatal temptation to every man. It was Jiang Su Su. When Jiang Su Su saw Xiao Xiao, she was startled at first and a panicked expression surfaced on her face. Immediately after, she forced herself to remain calm and said, "Xiao Wangye." Xiao Xiao only swept a glance at her before lowering his eyes. He did not look at her, nor did he speak. Jiang Su Su's body stiffened. Ever since she had started practicing the art of seduction, men's gazes had always fallen on her body. She had never been ignored like this before, and a burst of unwillingness arose in her heart. With a slight smile, she turned and sat on the chair next to Xiao Xiao. With every move she made, a familiar sweet fragrance wafted out, coinciding with the fragrance in the room. Sure enough, it was the smell of her body. Jiang Su Su tilted her head to look at the person on the chair. This youth was dressed entirely in black. Only the faint mist that came out of his sleeves made him seem even more noble. His side profile was elegant and peerless, but not the slightest bit feminine. He had thin lips, starry eyes, and a cold expression. There was a natural elegance that was engraved into one's bones. This was a beautiful but heroic youth. Even if he did not have the halo of Jinying Wangfu on him, his appearance and bearing were enough to move a woman's heart. For example, at this moment, Jiang Su Su was envious of Jiang Ruan's good luck in marrying the youth before her. Just now, Su Su was bathing when someone suddenly came in. When I took a look, I saw that it was Xiao Wangye. Jiang Su Su's voice carried a faintly discernible hook that tickled one's heart. Since this is the case, why not have a drink with Xiao Wangye? A man and a woman alone in a tea house, a little drunk. One person had just finished bathing and was only wearing a loose robe. What's more, this person was a stunning beauty. Her every move was very proactive. Even if all the men in the world were to witness this scene, it would be very difficult for them not to be moved. Xiao Xiao remained silent, the coldness between his brows never lessening. Seeing this, Jiang Su Su got up and walked to his side. She reached out to personally pour a cup of wine and handed it to Xiao Xiao. She seductively squatted down, almost reaching Xiao Xiao's knees. As she gazed at Xiao Xiao, her pair of limpid eyes were immediately filled with an indescribable charm. It was exactly the same as the faintly discernible sweet fragrance on her body. It made one feel as if they were looking at a soft, boneless little white flower that was trembling and blooming in the deep valley. It made one want to pluck it, make one want to tear that flower to shreds, and want to see the flower being abused. Seeing that Xiao Xiao did not move, Jiang Su Su moved a little closer. Her lips brushed past Xiao Xiao's ear and she softly said, "Xiao Wangye." Her breath was like orchids. Xiao Xiao's eyes narrowed. Without waiting for Jiang Su Su to make another move, the corner of his robe moved slightly. It was unknown when his hand, which was wearing a wrist guard, had moved. The white jade cup on the table fell to the ground and directly collided with Jiang Su Su's abdomen. The small jade cup seemed to be some kind of vicious hidden weapon. With a putong sound, Jiang Su Su's whole body flew out. Her back hit the jadeite screen in the room. Like a kite with a broken string, she lay on the ground and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Reckless! Xiao Xiao's indifferent voice, which contained anger, sounded. The sudden movement in the room stunned Jiang Su Su. She climbed up with difficulty. Xiao Xiao had only used about 30% of his strength, but she was almost unable to withstand it. What surprised her even more was that up until now, Xiao Xiao had been indifferent towards her. There was no man in this world who could resist her charm. She practiced the art of seduction. Even the most pure and desolate holy monk would fall head over heels for her. Not to mention that Xiao Xiao was a young man. Any young man would be tempted to see her. Especially today, she had specially groomed herself and dressed up, appearing in front of Xiao Xiao in a manner that no man could resist. She had thought that everything was flawless, but she had missed out on Xiao Xiao's plan. She knew that Xiao Xiao did not like women by nature, but those were all rumors. If he really did not like women, why would he go to the emperor to ask for Jiang Ruan's hand in marriage? Although Jiang Ruan was born with good looks, in terms of charm and seduction, how could it compare to her? She did not expect that not only had Xiao Xiao not been charmed by her, he had even dealt such a heavy blow to her. Xiao Wangye, Jiang Su Su spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood stained her cherry-red lips, making her appear even more seductive. She said, "Xiao Wangye does not have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex, it really makes Su Su sad." Xiao Xiao looked at her coldly. "Xiao Wangye, since you have seen my body today, do you think that it will be so easy for you to walk out of this door?" Jiang Su Su's lips curled up into a smile, unspeakably proud of herself. "Brother-in-law, you have seen my body, so I am yours. Today, I originally wanted to treat brother-in-law a little more gently, but I did not expect brother-in-law to be so unreasonable. I can only wait for Su Su to shout when we go out, and let brother-in-law lose some face." What a load of nonsense. Before she had finished speaking, a man's voice rang out in the room. A man dressed as an imperial bodyguard jumped out from the beam. Without thinking, he said to Jiang Su Su, "I've also seen your body. Doesn't that mean that you're also mine? Most of the secret guards here have probably all seen your body, so who do you want to give it to?" After saying this, he pretended to be distressed and scratched his head. However, the brothers are more interested in women from good families. Someone as bold and unrestrained as Miss, I really cannot bear it. This person was none other than Jin Air. He had long followed Xiao Xiao to lie in ambush in the room just to see what the Jiang family wanted to do. Afterwards, when he saw Jiang Su Su open her mouth to seduce Xiao Xiao, his heart was filled with disdain. If it was a woman from a brothel, then so be it. However, Jiang Su Su was the daughter of the Minister of the Secretariat. She was originally a peerless beauty who was rumored to be virtuous and talented, yet she could not even be compared to the daughter of an ordinary family. Ordinary girls knew about propriety, justice, integrity, and shame, but this Jiang Su Su did not even care about her face. Although he said this, Jin Air did not look at Jiang Su Su's body again. Jiang Su Su was originally a beauty, and coupled with the cultivation of charm, she was able to attract the eyes of all men. Especially that pair of eyes, it was extremely easy to be captivated by her. He did not know when he had fallen into Jiang Su Su's honey trap. However, what Jiang Su Su did not know was that Xiao Xiao had been in charge of the brocade guards since he was young. He had gone through mountains of blades and seas of fire, so his self-control was naturally much better than others. These few years, he had experienced many temptations, and it was not as if he had not seen peerless beauties. With Jiang Su Su's skills, Xiao Xiao really did not care about her, let alone be tempted. Jiang Su Su almost vomited another mouthful of blood. She did not expect that there would be another person hiding in this room. Listening to this person's tone, she was not the only one in the room. Thinking that today, for no reason, she had been seen by this group of bodyguards, Jiang Su Su's heart became unbearably gloomy. Now that things had come to this, she could only take a gamble. A man and a woman were in the same room. Although the woman's reputation would be tarnished, it would be easy for the man to shirk his responsibility. Jiang Su Su opened her mouth and was about to shout for the people outside to come in. However, as soon as she opened her mouth, Jin Air, who was beside her, quickly sealed her mute acupuncture point. Immediately, she could not make a sound. "Master, what should we do with this woman?" Jin Air asked. Xiao Xiao frowned and said, "Kill." Jiang Su Su's complexion immediately paled. This Xiao Xiao actually treated human life as grass, saying that killing people was as easy as chopping vegetables. However, at this moment, her whole body could not move, and a trace of genuine fear flashed through her eyes. Jin Air shrugged his shoulders and was about to mention Jiang Su Su when the door was pushed open. Jiang Ruan stepped into the room and naturally saw Jiang Su Su. She was startled for a moment before she asked, "What happened?" Xiao Xiao pondered for a moment before saying, "She seduced me, and I injured her." Jiang Su Su's complexion was already extremely splendid. Only at this moment did she understand that this man really did not have the slightest bit of feelings for her from the beginning to the end. If she had heard Xiao Xiao's words a few years ago, she would have long been so ashamed and resentful that she would have jumped into a well to commit suicide. Although now, she did not have the fierceness of the past, she still felt a deep sense of humiliation. It was as if she had racked her brains to use all her skills in front of others, but they thought it was just a joke. After listening to Xiao Xiao's words, Jiang Ruan raised her eyes to look at Jiang Su Su. Her expression was calm, and there was not even a trace of displeasure. Jiang Su Su's heart tightened. In the past, when Zhao Mei was still around, she had never paid any attention to Jiang Ruan. She knew that the final decision-maker in the Jiang Fu was still Jiang Quan. Jiang Quan did not like Zhao Mei, and treated Jiang Ruan and her sister even worse than Jiang Li. Jiang Ruan was also just a cowardly person who was afraid of trouble and as stupid as a pig. But she did not know when. No, it should be from the moment she returned to the Fu 3 years ago, but Jiang Su Su began to not understand Jiang Ruan. It seemed that it was from that moment onwards that Jiang Ruan no longer showed her emotions on her face. She smiled when she was happy, she smiled when she was angry, she smiled when she was framed, and she still smiled when she was thrown into prison. For example, at this moment, she still looked at Jiang Su Su with a smile. She was obviously very calm, but in the end, her upturned charming eyes revealed a trace of ridicule and disdain. It was that trace of disdain that immediately stung Jiang Su Su's eyes. She wanted to loudly criticize and curse, but no matter how she tried, she could not make a sound. Jiang Ruan withdrew her gaze and looked at Xiao Xiao, saying, "Yinyang asked me to come and see you. Originally, it was to see this play." "What, you actually did not get seduced? This play seems to be very difficult to continue." Xiao Xiao was slightly startled. He was originally intelligent, and immediately understood the key point. So this was Hong Ying's plan. If it had been another man today, he would have long been under Jiang Su's charm and would have really done that absurd thing. Coincidentally, Jiang Ruan pushed open the door and entered. Naturally, she could see the scene before her. For an unmarried woman to see her own younger sister and her future husband like this, she naturally could not bear it. However, the Empress Dowager's decree could not be changed. If one was a little more enthusiastic, it was also possible that they would commit suicide. At that time, they could use some reason to cover it up, and the matter of the D sister marrying on behalf of her would naturally come to fruition. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? If one had a softer temperament, they would be able to endure it. But in the end, she was the D daughter of a Fu. Her pure reputation could not be tarnished in vain. Naturally, the other party had to pay for it. It was always against the rules for a D daughter to become a concubine. At that time, it was not difficult to become a side concubine, and it could also fulfill a wonderful story of sisters working together to serve one husband. But no matter which one it was, it would be a huge blow to the young miss. Whether she was dead or alive, her entire life would be affected by this matter, and she would not be happy for the rest of her life. Even if she reluctantly married, there would always be a knot in her heart. How could she be on the same level as her husband? It was only a matter of time before she lost her husband's favor. Today's matter seemed simple, but in fact, it was closely linked. In the end, the sinister intentions were really enough to make one speechless. Hong Ying and Jiang Su had indeed expended a lot of effort on this matter. They had expected a man's deep-rooted bad habits, but they had not expected Xiao Xiao's innate indifference and cruelty. They had also not expected that Jiang Ruan would be so calm, to the extent that she did not even have the intention to misunderstand. Xiao Xiao also saw Jiang Ruan's calmness, and in his heart, he even felt slightly disappointed. Anyone who truly cared about him would have shown some concern at this moment. The calmer she was, the more it showed that she did not take this matter to heart. Xiao Xiao thought this in his heart, but he misunderstood Jiang Ruan's thoughts. Jiang Ruan looked at the leftover wine in the room, the sweet fragrance wafting in the air, and then looked at Jiang Su's disheveled appearance. Anger slowly rose in her heart. It was at this time that she suddenly remembered the scene in her previous life when Xianli had sent her to prison. Jiang Su had also flaunted her prowess in the prison to see her, and had tirelessly told her about her sweet past with Xianli. At that time, Jiang Su's words were like a bolt from the blue to her. She had been sincere, but at the last moment, she had found out that it was nothing more than a meticulously planned scam. Xianli and Jiang Su had secretly been together. At that time, she did not understand why Xianli kept saying that she was the only one in his heart, but he had still done intimate things with Jiang Su that she had never done before. Thinking about it, Jiang Su had also done the same thing in front of Xianli at that time, and thus caused him to treat her differently. In her previous life, Jiang Su had unexpectedly been irreconcilable with her. In her previous life, she had admired Xianli, and Jiang Su had snatched Xianli away. In this life, the Empress Dowager had bestowed marriage upon her and Xiao Xiao, and Jiang Su had come to snatch Xiao Xiao away. Jiang Ruan was unhappy in her heart, and the eyes that looked at Jiang Su immediately became deep and serene. "What do you plan to do?" Xiao Xiao asked. "Kill." Although Xiao Xiao was known as a rebel, and his arrangements were very thorough, he did not care about the intrigues and jealousies in the inner courtyard. His way of doing things was cruel but straightforward, and he even used the unique methods of the brocade guards, simple and crude, just kill. Jiang Su did not understand Xiao Xiao. Perhaps it was because Xiao Xiao had only appeared in rumors, and all that was said about him was hearsay. Jiang Su Su also regarded him as a person like other men, but she did not know that Xiao Xiao was an extremely prideful person. Even if he had been schemed against today, he would not obediently listen to the Jiang Fu's manipulation. The most likely scenario was that he would kill the Jiang Fu's people in a fit of rage and swagger off. In the end, even if the emperor really had no choice but to arrest him, it would only be a matter of picking him up and gently dropping him. Why? Jiang Yuan said softly, "We are sisters, there is no need to be ruthless." It's just, she looked at Jiang Su Su, who was waiting for her with hatred, and smiled slightly, since second younger sister is so afraid that she will not be able to marry, and even did not hesitate to set her sights on you, I, as her older sister, must also help. Xiao Xiao looked at her, and said thoughtfully, "What do you want?" Second younger sister is an outstanding beauty, and her body, as clean as ice and as clean as jade, should be seen by more people. Jiang Yuan said faintly, "There are so many manservants in the Jiang Fu. To be able to marry a beauty like second younger sister, I think they should be gratified." A trace of weariness quickly flashed through her eyes. Even though it was only for a short moment, Xiao Xiao's sensitive senses caught it. He sensed that in that moment, Jiang Yuan's mood must have undergone some kind of change, although he did not know why it had prompted her to make this decision. However, he had always unconditionally agreed with Jiang Yuan's words, so he nodded and said, "All right." Jiang Su Su stared at Jiang Yuan in disbelief. She did not expect that Jiang Yuan's guts would be so big. Perhaps it was because Jiang Yuan clearly had a way to put her to death a few times before, but in the end, she did not take any action. This made Jiang Su Su think that Jiang Yuan must have some sort of taboo. Jiang Yuan doted on Jiang Su Su so much. If anything were to happen to Jiang Su Su, as long as it was even the slightest bit related to Jiang Yuan, Jiang Quan would certainly not leave any leeway to make things difficult for Jiang Yuan. However, now that Jiang Yuan had spoken like this, it was clear that she intended to shed all pretense of cordiality and not leave any leeway. Jiang Yuan walked to stand in front of her and looked down at her. Her gaze was as calm as water. She had never forgotten the hatred from her previous life. Originally, she had intended to make Jiang Su Su lose everything and then slowly collapse. But now, it seemed that she had made an unnecessary move. Now that Xia Yan had been defeated, Jiang Chao's future in the imperial examinations had been ruined, and her own reputation was not good. Compared to her previous life's flowery and splendid life, this elegant and beautiful fairy's appearance could be said to be a completely different person. Her original obsession now seemed superfluous. Jiang Su Su was used to pretending. All along, she had often acted like a fairy only because she had extravagantly sought a higher status. This kind of person, whose ambition was higher than the sky, had ended up in a lowly position. Every day, she had to rely on others to survive. What kind of feeling was that? To Jiang Su Su, this might not necessarily be a kind of painful torture and punishment. Jiang Yuan lowered her eyes. She could not spend all her time on a smelly bug that was destined to worship at her feet for the rest of her life. She still had Jiang Xing, the Zhao family, and Xian Pei. Any possible calamity would be eradicated with all her might. Even if Jiang Su Su stayed another day, it would not benefit her. There were many things that needed to be sped up, but Jiang Su Su had been comfortable for too long. She said indifferently, "Then I will trouble my husband to think of a way to throw second sister out. Remember, the more lively the place, the better." Her lips held a smile, bright and moving like a red fox. Such beauty deserves to be appreciated by tens of thousands of people. Xiao Xiao was shocked by the natural husband that Jiang Yuan spoke of. He did not know whether he was shocked or frightened, but in the end, a faint sense of joy rose on his face. After a moment of silence, he said, "Jin Air." Jin Air scratched his head and stood up. All right, master, how about throwing her at the main gate of the Jiang Fu? It's too far, I'm really tired." "That's good." Jiang Yuan smiled, "You've worked hard." "It's not hard, as long as young madam understands young master." Jin Air also smiled, and with one hand, he lifted Jiang Su Su and flew out. The martial arts of the hidden guards were not low. Moreover, there were already people waiting outside to receive them. Those servants and old women guarding the door, waiting to watch a good show, had probably already been taken care of. Otherwise, they would not have taken so long to come out. After Jin Air left, Xiao Xiao raised his eyes to look at Jiang Yuan, and suddenly asked, "You're not happy?" "Of course I'm not as happy as you." Jiang Yuan's expression did not change, and her smile was still warm, but for some reason, it made people feel a sense of displeasure, or perhaps a faint anger. She said, "A peerless beauty coming to seduce you, it is not something that just anyone can encounter. Husband is very fortunate." Xiao Xiao stared blankly, and lowered his eyes to think for a moment. Suddenly, an extremely faint smile appeared on his face. Chapter 164. Xiao Xiao looked at her thoughtfully. Jiang Yuan was indeed angry. This discovery caused a faint feeling of satisfaction to rise in his heart. Even the cold expression that had not disappeared since Jiang Su's appearance had disappeared, leaving only a hint of a smile. Jiang Yuan looked at his smile and felt increasingly annoyed. This annoyance also contained a little loathing for herself. Since her rebirth, perhaps because of the lessons of her previous life, she did not put too much hope in anything. But once she set her mind on something, she would have a strong desire to possess it. Now that she had accepted becoming the mistress of the household in Jinying Wangfu, regardless of whether she had feelings for Xiao Xiao or not, in her heart, Xiao Xiao was hers. Jiang Su had touched her things, so naturally, she was displeased. However, the initiator of all this did not have the slightest self-awareness. With a beautiful face, she pretended to be innocent. The angrier she became, the more adorable she was in Xiao Xiao's eyes. Without waiting for Jiang Yuan to open her mouth, he pulled her to his side and pressed her onto his lap. "You!" Jiang Yuan was furious. Logically speaking, this was not the first time Xiao Xiao had done this. When she was in Jinying Wangfu, she was also fortunate enough to be treated with such courtesy by Xiao Xiao. However, at that time, Xiao Xiao was drunk and delirious, so it could be ignored. Now, in broad daylight, although there was an engagement, this action was too rash and sudden. "Don't move." Xiao Xiao pressed down on her back. His movements were gentle, but his strength was surprisingly great, leaving no room for resistance. However, his next words caused Jiang Yuan to lose her intention to treat him coldly. He said, "It is only right and proper for my husband to hug me." Jiang Yuan rolled her eyes in her heart, only to hear Xiao Xiao say, "It would be better to change to the beautiful woman in front of you to seduce me." This person was always cold and sarcastic, but when he spoke, he had a way with words. Jiang Yuan looked at him in disbelief and was somewhat puzzled. She had originally thought that he was joking, but he had a serious look on his face, which made her scratch her head in puzzlement. However, after Xiao Xiao's actions, that bit of displeasure from before disappeared without a trace. Indeed, being born good was an advantage. Jiang Yuan thought to herself that beauty could bewitch people. For a moment, she only cared about her own matters and did not pay attention to Xiao Xiao's expression. She also overlooked the joy that flashed in Xiao Xiao's eyes as he held the beauty in his arms. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Xiao's expression changed slightly. He patted her head and said, "Someone is coming." Others could not control what these two people did in private, but in the end, Jiang Yuan was still unmarried, so she still had to scrupulously observe etiquette. Moreover, the Jiangfu was such a troublesome place, and if one wasn't careful, unfavorable rumors about Jiang Yuan could easily spread. With Xiao Xiao's reminder, Jiang Yuan stood up and obediently picked up the teacup on the table, pretending to pour some tea for Xiao Xiao. She heard someone knocking on the door. "Eldest miss?" Judging from the voice, it was Hong Ying. Hong Ying must have noticed that there was no movement after a long time. Seeing that the person who came to report did not return, she must have grown suspicious. Thus, she personally came to see what was going on. The timing was just right. If it weren't for the fact that he had other plans, he would have fallen into Hong Ying's trap. Jiang Ruan smiled slightly, "Come in." Hong Ying's hand that was pushing the door paused for a moment, and her heart immediately started pounding. How could Jiang Ruan be so calm? Why was it so quiet inside? Not even the slightest trace of displeasure could be heard. The manservant and old woman who were responsible for guarding the door had also disappeared. The more afraid Hong Ying was, the more she did not dare to rashly push the door open. In her heart, she could not help but begin to regret agreeing to Jiang Su's request so hastily. That Xiao Xiao was not an ordinary person. If he saw through her and wanted revenge, she would not be able to do anything. In the end, the door was pushed open. Hong Ying took a deep breath and looked inside. She saw that the inside was neat and tidy, and Jiang Ruan was standing beside Xiao Xiao, pouring tea for him. Nothing seemed out of place. Hong Ying looked at the two people inquiringly. Jiang Ruan was still as calm as before, and there was no emotion on her face. There was a faint smile on her lips, and as always, no one could understand what she was thinking. Xiao Xiao was the same, indifferent as before, and there was no special expression on his face. But even so, Hong Ying could still feel the faint joy in the room. Joy? What had happened here? Hong Ying looked around, but did not find Jiang Su's figure. What was going on? Hong Ying was startled at first, but then she slowly calmed down. She even rejoiced in her heart. Looking at Jiang Ruan and Xiao Xiao's unhappiness, it seemed that Jiang Su had not succeeded. Hong Ying was somewhat disappointed, and at the same time, she felt somewhat incredulous. According to Jiang Su's plan, she should not have failed. With Jiang Su's charm, even without any special means, she could make men go crazy for her. Why was Xiao Xiao an exception? Unexpectedly, he did not fall head over heels for her. Hong Ying changed her train of thought and heaved a sigh of relief. Just now, when she had pushed the door open, she somewhat regretted rashly agreeing to Jiang Su's request. After all, this Xiao Xiao was an important minister of the imperial court, and his power was more than several times that of Jiang Quan. If he really found out that she had colluded with Jiang Su to scheme against him, it was inevitable that he would be angry and retaliate. The risk of opposing such a person was really too great. Now that Jiang Su had overestimated her capabilities and fled, this matter could be considered to have been let off the hook. No matter what, it had nothing to do with her. She smiled apologetically and said, "I came to see if your highness and eldest young miss still need anything. I will then order people to prepare it. This is also the first time that your highness has entered our fu. In the future, our two families will have a close relationship, so we absolutely cannot neglect you." Jiang Ruan lightly glanced at her. Her curly eyelashes suddenly flickered, and she smiled slightly. "Yin Yang is really considerate, but speaking of which, this room does indeed need to be tidied up." Hong Ying stared blankly and asked blankly, "Eldest young miss, do you have any instructions?" Xiao Xiao looked at Jiang Ruan without saying a word, his gaze full of indulgence. Obviously, he was also prepared to respectfully listen to this young madam's nonsense. Jiang Ruan combed her hair, and her expression was incomparably sincere, without any trace of pretense. The tea room that Yin Yang chose has a beautiful scenery, and the location is also very good. However, perhaps it has been too long since anyone has come to tidy it up, so there are rats nibbling inside. Rats? Hong Ying had originally been a little nervous when she heard Jiang Ruan speak, but upon hearing her words, she laughed. How could there be rats? Eldest young miss might have seen wrongly. I had previously ordered people to specially tidy it up. Moreover, in order to achieve her goal, Jiang Su had already arranged the inside and outside of the tea room. How could such a fragrant place be tolerated by rats? Yin Yang, if you don't believe me, you can go and take a look. Jiang Ruan pointed at the jadeite screen in the room, and her smile became a little more meaningful. Just now, the rats suddenly scuttled out and gave me a fright, so Xiao Wangye acted and killed the rats. Isn't that the stain left behind? Hong Ying looked in the direction that Jiang Ruan was pointing at, and saw that under the jadeite screen was, shockingly, a pool of blood. Some of the blood had splashed onto the jadeite screen, and it was exceptionally clear, causing one's heart to skip a beat. At first, Hong Ying was somewhat puzzled, but just as she was about to say a few words, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind, and she immediately retreated a few steps with a deathly pale face. She stared fixedly at the pool of blood, and then turned her head to look at Jiang Yuan. Jiang Yuan smiled and nodded at her, saying softly, "Yinyang, did you see it clearly?" At this moment, they heard someone shouting loudly from outside, "Not good, not good, something has happened to second young miss." Less than a few hundred meters from the entrance of the Jiangfu, the place had long been surrounded by people so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside were all commoners, and among these commoners, the men's eyes were especially fanatical. What a beautiful and charming woman, that look in her eyes is practically seducing this prince. She really has the face of a fairy and the body of a prostitute. This figure, even if it lingers on the beam for 9 days, it will not disappear. Whose family's young lady is this? Why is she lying here without rhyme or reason? There were also kind-hearted people who asked. Look at her attire, how does she look like the daughter of a good family? Hey, brother, you probably haven't seen such a thing in your daily life. We've seen this kind of situation many times in the capital city. Most of the time, it's indecent women who hang around with men and are punished by the main wife. Isn't this deliberately giving her a taste of her own medicine? However, this woman is really strong, just looking at her makes one unable to bear it. I don't know which family's young master has such good fortune, but the most difficult thing to bear is a beauty's kindness. Hey! What kind of gaze is that? What indecent woman? Isn't this the second young miss of the Jiang family from the Shangshu Fu? That's the famous talented woman in the capital city. Why does she look so familiar to me? I'm sure I'm not mistaken. What's going on? The person who was surrounded in the middle of the crowd was dressed in a plain white dress. The dress itself was somewhat faintly discernible, outlining the lines that made one's imagination run wild. Her long black hair, which had just taken a bath, was wet and stuck to her body, causing the originally somewhat thin dress to become even more transparent. One could almost see the beautiful scenery under the robe. The woman's head was lowered, but her delicate and elegant little face could still be seen. At this moment, it was unknown whether she was angry or embarrassed. Her bright little face was slightly flushed, but it made one's heart even more swayed. The light sweet fragrance that came from her body was enshrouded in the air, like a first-rate aphrodisiac, causing the surrounding people to look at her like wolves and tigers. Several men began to become restless, wanting to make a move on her. Jiang Su gritted her teeth so hard that they almost broke. When the imperial bodyguard had thrown her here, she did not know which of her acupuncture points had been sealed. At this moment, her whole body was really soft, and she could not exert any strength at all. Like a drowning dog, she let these lowly commoners watch the fun, and even more so, she had to accept the disgusting gazes of these men. When Jiang Su thought of this, she wished that she could gouge out all the eyeballs of the people who were looking at her. Of course, the person she hated the most was the cause of all this, Jiang Yuan. She could not say anything, and could only hear the unbearable words and discussions of the people around her reaching her ears. Don't bully me for being inexperienced. In any case, that Shangshu Fu is a dignified official's family. How could a pure and clean young miss act in such a lewd manner? Moreover, look at this woman, her entire body is full of flirtatious charm. How could this be done by a proper young miss? I'm afraid that she has long understood the affairs of the heart. She's a stunner. A pot-bellied middle-aged man finally could not bear it any longer. Waving a fan, he walked forward and squatted down in front of Jiang Su. He pinched Jiang Su's chin and forced her to raise her head. As soon as she raised her head, the surrounding people could clearly see Jiang Su's appearance. Immediately, they sucked in a breath of cold air and praised her for her good looks. The middle-aged man was obviously very satisfied. His lecherous eyes wandered up and down Jiang Su's entire body before he said, "Not bad, you're a wonderful person. May I know which brothel this young miss is from? Come back with me and be my 17th concubine. I will love you dearly." This man was dressed in gold and silver, but his appearance was unbearably crude. The way he spoke was also very vulgar. With one look, one could tell that he was the master of some family who had suddenly become rich. Normally, if someone treated Jiang Su this way, she would have already scolded them. But now, facing such a disgusting face, she could not even open her mouth. Seeing that Jiang Su did not make a sound, the middle-aged man took it that she had agreed. He stretched out his plump hand and patted her face. "Beautiful girl, come home with me." However, this was not the only person in the crowd who had lustful thoughts. Immediately, someone said, "This young miss was clearly mine first. Why are you fighting over her? It was a rather wealthy young master from an official's family. What are you arguing about? This old man has also taken a fancy to this woman. There must be a rule, first come, first served. This beautiful woman would always attract attention, not to mention such a natural beauty. Some people wanted to take this beauty home and make her their own, while others wanted to dress this beauty up properly and give her to their superiors in exchange for a successful career. If such a beautiful woman caught the eyes of their superiors and was given away as a gift, it would certainly be a great honor." Unlike the men, the women looked at Jiang Su with eyes full of contempt. Tisk, nowadays this foxy woman is getting more and more incredible. She actually has no sense of shame in the streets and alleys. Indeed. The women's eyes could not tolerate this kind of vulgar person. One after another, they discussed, "This is really degrading public morals. This brothel woman is really shameless. How can an ordinary family do such a thing?" They actually regarded Jiang Su as a prostitute from a brothel. Jiang Su only hated that she could not speak at the moment. Otherwise, she would definitely use a pair of scissors to cut off the tongues of these long-tongued women. All her life, she believed that she was a fairy who had descended from the Nine Heavens Jade Lake. She had always had an aloof appearance that was above the common people. Even in the capital, all kinds of praises added a layer of brilliance to her mystery. When had she fallen to such a sorry state? It was as if all her disguise had been stripped away and she was naked in front of everyone's eyes. It was really, extremely humiliating. The only thing that could prove her charm was perhaps those men who fought over her because of jealousy. Even at this point, these men still fell head over heels for her beauty. It was just that, at this moment, the men who fought over her were all ordinary people. They were either merchants who reeked of money or country gentlemen who suddenly became rich. They were worlds apart from those elegant young masters of the past. Even the most inconspicuous person among those who admired her in the past was still many times better than everyone here. There was a sharp contrast between the present and the past. Jiang Su was simply about to collapse from the situation in front of her. This fight attracted more and more people. At this moment, she heard a voice, "Over there." Jiang Su looked up and saw that the crowd had been separated into two sides, and a few people were walking in from the outside. At the very front were a few servants, and behind them was a woman with a big belly. It was Hong Ying. Suddenly seeing Hong Ying, Jiang Su was angry and anxious. Hong Ying hurriedly stepped forward and without saying anything, ordered the servants to help Jiang Su walk away. They knew that this was a scandal and did not dare to do anything to reveal their identity. They only hoped that things could be settled. However, even though Hong Ying thought this way, the people around her were not willing. The men who were fighting over Jiang Su stopped at the same time. One of them stood in front of Hong Ying and said, "What are you doing? You dare to touch the person that I like?" Hong Ying held back her anger and smiled at the man. "Sir, to tell you the truth, this is a niece of this concubine's distant relative. Due to some matters, this concubine has to bring her back. Sir, please excuse us for a while. If it was someone else, it would have been fine." However, the other party was a rough and ignorant rich merchant. He immediately laughed and said, "Young lady, don't bully me for being ignorant. This woman said that she was a distant niece. Clearly, she was a girl from a brothel. I, your master, am not an unreasonable person. Young lady, just name your price. I will pay any amount of money. I like this little beauty. I want to take her back to be my 17th concubine. Hong Ying's cheeks flushed with anger. This person was so unreasonable that it was impossible to reason with him. However, she could not let this person casually take Jiang Su Su away. If Jiang Su Su was taken away, and there were people who knew her, there would be no place for the Jiang family in the capital. As for Jiang Quan, if he knew that his most beloved second daughter had met with such a mishap, he would definitely put all the blame on her head. At that time, she would not have any good results to eat. However, Hong Ying had forgotten that even if Jiang Su Su had not been taken away, there was no such thing as an airtight wall in this world. Paper could never cover fire, and this matter would eventually spread. At present, it had not been exposed because the people could not associate this woman with the second Miss Fairy of the minister's residence. However, the capital was only so big, and there were always a few people who knew her. Today, Jiang Su Su had met with such a mishap in front of the minister's residence. Her reputation could be considered ruined. How could she have a good end in this life? For a woman, this life was worse than death. If Jiang Quan knew about this, how could he let it go? Hong Ying forced a smile. Sir, she is not a girl from a brothel. She is a girl from a proper family. I am afraid that your wish will not be fulfilled. What proper girl? The wealthy merchant was also somewhat displeased. Do you think I don't have eyes? What are you trying to do by declining like this? Guards, bring my 17th Inyang back. This person was completely unreasonable and intended to directly snatch her back. Not only that, he looked at Hong Ying and giggled. Little girl, don't fail to appreciate my kindness. Hong Ying had never met such a scoundrel. In a moment of desperation, she said, you dare. Do you know who she is? Who is she? The man smiled insincerely. Could it be that she is a member of the Golden Branch or Jade Leaf family? Hong Ying choked and did not dare to say Jiang Su Su's name. At this moment, she saw a person dressed as an imperial bodyguard running over from afar. He said in a loud voice, Inyang, the princess has asked me to help find the whereabouts of the second Mississippi. Is there any news? Chapter 165. Hong Ying's mind exploded. She felt her vision darken and she almost fainted. There was only one thought in her mind, it's over. Today's matter would not end well. With an anxious expression, the imperial bodyguard rushed forward and squeezed to Hong Ying's side. When he saw Jiang Su Su's collapsed appearance in the room, he was shocked and said, so it's actually here. Who did this to second miss? Are they tired of living? If Junju finds out, she will not let the culprit off. The surrounding people had originally intended to watch the commotion, but they did not expect to be suddenly interrupted. Seeing that the guard kept referring to her as Junju, and that the guard did not look like an ordinary person, they muttered in their hearts. Even the wealthy merchant was shocked by the guard's appearance. He hesitated for a moment before asking, this young brother, which Junju are you talking about? What is the identity of the young miss on the ground? Hong Ying hurriedly replied, you don't have to worry about this. In short, she is a member of our family. We have to take her away now. Someone in the crowd shouted, Io, didn't this master just want to carry the young miss on the ground back to the Fu to be his 17th Inyang? Why is he not doing it now? When the guard heard this, he did not wait for Hong Ying to speak again and shouted, how dare you? You dare to insult the young miss. Open your dog eyes and take a good look. This is the capital's Jiang family's minister's Fu's second miss, the younger sister of the current Junju of Honghen. When these words were spoken, the crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. Jiang Su Su almost dug her fingernails into her palms. Her lips trembled incessantly, and her entire person felt as if she had fallen into an icehouse. This person's singing and speaking were excellent. With one look, it was obvious that Jiang Ruan had deliberately ordered people to do this in order to expose her identity in public and embarrass her. This was even more unbearable than killing her. Because of today's incident, there was no place for her to hide her reputation. Her life could be considered ruined. Hong Ying's face also turned pale. She could not wait to need the guard and throw him beyond the highest heavens. Looking at the crowd's sizing gaze, Hong Ying herself wanted to find a hole to burrow into. More importantly, a sudden fear arose in her heart. Jiang Su had met with such a major incident under her care. Among the 3 daughters of the Jiang Fu, only Jiang Su was truly loved by Jiang Quan. Such a precious daughter had made such a big joke. Even if he vented his anger on her, Jiang Quan would still kill her. Ultimately, it was all because of Jiang Ruan. Hong Ying could not help but resent Jiang Ruan's vicious and merciless methods. Not only did she want to humiliate Jiang Su, but she also wanted to completely destroy Jiang Su's reputation, so much so that Jiang Su would never be able to raise her head again. This was a huge blow to both the Jiang Fu and Jiang Quan. To think that Jiang Ruan would actually disregard their brotherly ties. However, Hong Ying had forgotten that when she and Jiang Su had conspired together to plot against Jiang Ruan, had they ever considered the slightest bit of sibling affection? As the saying goes, harming others will eventually harm oneself. The surrounding crowd, who had been watching the show, had already begun to discuss spiritedly. Even the wealthy merchant, who had been clamoring for Jiang Su to go back and become the 17th Inyang, had shut his mouth and was sizing Jiang Su up. Everyone's gazes were filled with disbelief. Someone in the crowd said, "Just now, I said that this miss looks 90% similar to the second miss of the Jiang Fu, but you guys just don't believe me." "Who would have thought?" someone else replied, "but according to the rumors, isn't the second miss of the Jiang Fu a fairy-like person? How did she end up in such a situation? Was she harmed by someone?" "What do you mean by harmed by someone? Look at her behavior. Just the smell of her body makes one's blood boil. What kind of decent lady would be so flirtatious? From what I see, this second miss of the Jiang Fu probably already has a certain charm." "That's right. Sigh, she looks like a fairy. With this kind of behavior, she really doesn't seem like a decent lady. No wonder people think that she's the red card of the Chu residence's brothel." Discussions like these did not cease. Every sentence hammered Jiang Su's heart, almost causing her to be inconsolable from shame and indignation. However, what people said was not wrong. The eyes of the common people in the marketplace were the most poisonous. Ever since Jiang Su had started practicing the art of seduction, every movement she made had an additional charm to it. Even though she was born elegant and beautiful, it could not conceal her fragrance. This charm was different from the charm of Jiang Ruan's appearance, and it had an additional allure that could be plucked by anyone. Ordinary men were experienced and knowledgeable, so they could naturally discern the meaning behind this. Moreover, what kind of young lady would have such a graceful appearance? Not to mention the fact that she was dressed so elegantly and vaguely today. Jean Eyre shot a meaningful glance at Jean San, who was mixed in the crowd and was leading the people to spread rumors. He was almost proud of himself. Just now, he had shouted so loudly because of the urgency of the situation. Those who should and should not have heard it, had now all heard it. Jean San also raised his voice and pretended to be unintentional as he said, "Sigh, since she is the second miss of the minister's Fu, and now her body has been seen by these people, shouldn't all my brothers also take responsibility? She is a pure and proper young lady, how can she be taken advantage of for no reason?" As soon as he finished speaking, there was another round of discussion. Jiang Su and Hong Ying were already dumbstruck. Some of the surrounding people who were watching the commotion also came back to their senses and shouted, "That's right, young Mrs. Body has been seen by me. This young man is willing to take responsibility and marry young Miss back home as the official wife." These words were said in a dignified manner, but when they looked at that person again, he was nothing more than a hooligan on the streets. Everyone understood in their hearts that Jiang Su's body had been seen in public, and it was all because of one person. Anyone with a bit of reputation would not marry her back home as the official wife, so that they could make fun of her after a meal. However, those hooligans in the marketplace were different. After all, the minister's Fu was also an official's family, and Jiang Su's appearance was not bad. If they married her back home, they would be able to rely on the minister's Fu, which would be a wonderful thing. Thinking this way, more and more people were willing to take responsibility, and in the midst of the dispute, they all took the stance of going to the Jiang Fu to propose marriage. Hong Ying could not resist, but the crowd grew larger and larger. Jean Eyre shouted, "What nonsense are you all talking about?" Looking at the servants, he said, "What are you all standing around for? Quickly help second miss back to the Fu. Let's talk about these trivial matters later." He did not say anything definite, but by leaving the other half unsaid, it actually increased the confidence of those hooligans. In their view, when such a scandal occurred in a wealthy family, the young miss would generally not be able to live. If she did not commit suicide, she would find a temple to cut her hair and become a nun. However, everyone in the capital knew that Minister Jiang doted on his second daughter, so Jiang Quan certainly could not bear to see a perfectly fine daughter commit suicide or lead a bitter life of self-cultivation. If this wealthy family did not marry Jiang Su, then wouldn't it be the turn of small shrimps like them? Thinking of this, those hooligans became even more excited, and the scene of themselves dressed in red robes and becoming the Jiang Fu's son-in-law appeared before their eyes. Because of Minister Jiang Fu and Jiang Ruan's status as Hong and royal princess, these people did not dare to be strong forever. When Jean Eyre ordered the servants to help Jiang Su onto a horse carriage and return to the Fu, a large group of youngsters followed behind in a grandiose manner. They were all ambitious people who were willing to take responsibility for Jiang Su's innocence. Although they could not be strong forever, the hooligans in the marketplace were most adept at tormenting people, causing trouble, and using some underhanded methods to disturb people. Those who did not intend to take responsibility but had already watched the bustling scene, stood far away to one side, arms crossed, and discussed. It seemed that the Jiang Fu was bound to set off a storm in the capital. Jiang Quan had just left court when he heard the news of Jiang Su's mishap. Along the way, he was muddle-headed and his mind was blank. When he returned to the Fu, he had just entered Hong Ying's courtyard when he saw Jiang Su sitting on the bed in a daze, sobbing. Hong Ying also appeared to be out of her wits. Hearing his footsteps, both of them turned to look at the same time. Jiang Su glanced at Jiang Quan and cried out involuntarily, "Father." She could no longer hold back her tears. If it was in the past, Jiang Quan's heart would certainly ache when Jiang Su cried like this. However, today's matter was no small matter. Previously, there was the matter of Xia Yan shamelessly having an illicit affair with someone. Now, this matter had happened to Jiang Su. It was as if a handful of salt had been sprinkled on Jiang Quan's most taboo matter, immediately causing him to recall some bad things. Immediately, the little bit of pity in Jiang Quan's heart vanished into thin air. In a few steps, he walked in front of Jiang Su. Without saying a word, he fiercely raised his hand and gave Jiang Su a slap. Jiang Su was slightly dazed by Jiang Quan's slap. In all her life, Jiang Quan had never laid a hand on her. Even if today's matter had happened, although she was aware that it was a serious matter, she still thought that as long as she cried a little, Jiang Quan would definitely resolve it for her. Who knew that Jiang Quan would give her a slap without saying a word? Even if Jiang Su was usually stupid, when she saw that Jiang Quan's attitude was not right, her heart also panicked. Knowing that the situation was not good, she hurriedly cried again, "Father." After Jiang Quan had slapped her, he also felt some regret. Jiang Su was the daughter that he had pampered and raised in the palm of his hand. Not to mention hitting her, he had never even spoken harshly to her since she was young. Even if Xia Yan had done such a filthy thing, she still treated Jiang Su the same way she had in the past. He looked at Jiang Su who was covering her face and weeping, and his heart softened. His anger from just now was somewhat restrained, and he only coldly said, "What exactly happened? The Jiang family's face has been completely thrown away by you." These words were not false. It was said that the minister's Fu had gone from being a clean and upright family to having a foul reputation now. It had only been a few short years. Moreover, all sorts of things had happened to Xia Yan and her two sons. After Xia Yan's incident, there had been a period of peace and quiet for a period of time. Now, such a matter had once again erupted. Now, the entire capital was using this matter as a joke. In the few hours since the beginning, the entire capital had already been talking about today's matter. Thinking of this matter, Jiang Quan's heart was filled with a belly full of gloominess. Jiang Su's heart jumped. She thought that since the matter had come to this, the only way out was to push all the blame onto Jiang Yuan. She hung her head and said in a resentful tone, "Father, your daughter was harmed to this state by someone. Father, you must avenge your daughter." At this moment, Hong Ying also understood and hurriedly said, "That's right, second miss is innocent. Today, she has fallen to this state, and it was all because she was framed. Second Miss's life is really bitter. Everything was fine, but for no reason, she has suffered such an undeserved calamity." Jiang Quan did not know that such a thing would happen. Hearing Jiang Su and Hong Ying echo each other's words, he immediately became furious and said, "Who has the guts to actually dare to behave atrociously in the minister's Fu? Who dares to scheme against my Jiang family's daughter?" Jiang Su was his precious daughter. Just now, he was extremely angry, but now that he heard that she had been framed, it was as if all the anger in his heart had suddenly found an outlet to vent. Now, Jiang Quan only wanted to find the person who had framed Jiang Su and dismember him into 10,000 pieces. "It's De Jijia." Jiang Su spat out a few words with great difficulty. As if she could not bear it, she covered her face and sobbed, "It was De Jijia who ordered people to knock me out and send me there." Jinying Wang was also there, he was also supporting De Jijia. Jiang Su pushed all the blame onto Jiang Yuan and Xiao, but did not know that Hong Ying's expression had changed, and she secretly scolded her for being an idiot. Speaking of which, although Jiang Su was a little clever, in the end, these were all small tricks that could not be brought to the public. Compared to Xia Yan, she was still far behind. It was precisely because Xia Yan had protected her so well that she had not needed to worry about other things since she was young. Jiang Su was really brainless, and only knew how to put on a fairy-like appearance to deceive people. Just like her current reason, it was full of loopholes and was really not very brilliant. Jiang Quan had originally been listening to Jiang Su's words wholeheartedly, but after Jiang Su had finished speaking, his expression sank. He stared at this daughter of his as if he did not know her. Jiang Su waited for Jiang Quan to angrily find trouble with Jiang Yuan, but suddenly felt that something was wrong. Jiang Quan's gaze made her somewhat afraid, and she whispered, "Father, why are you looking at me like that?" "Evil girl," Jiang Quan's voice trembled slightly. Looking at Jiang Su's obviously startled expression, he coldly said, "You said that Jinying Wang and Jiang Yuan had joined forces to harm you. Out of the two of them, one is a Junju, and the other is a Prince Shi. Why would they need to frame you? On the other hand, what's up with your clothes?" Jiang Su's body shrank back, and her tone was extremely aggrieved. "Father, you are actually helping outsiders. I am your daughter. I don't have such a lewd and lowly daughter like you." Jiang Quan was so anxious and angry that he roared. Even Hong Ying, who was standing at the side, was flabbergasted to hear such unbearable words. Jiang Quan had wholeheartedly doted on this daughter of his, but today, he was scolding her in such a manner. Clearly, he was disappointed in Jiang Su from the bottom of his heart. "Help you," Jiang Quan's face was terrifyingly gloomy. "What are you planning? My Jiang Fu has unexpectedly produced such a daughter who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, and has delusions of climbing into Jinying Wang's bed. Look clearly, what kind of person is Jinying Wang? If you want to die, my Jiang Fu cannot afford to lose this face, and cannot afford to lose this life. Jiang Quan had been immersed in officialdom for many years, so naturally, he was not stupid. Jiang Su Su's words were full of loopholes. Although Xiao Xiao was a cold and fierce person, he was not the kind of person who would take the initiative to cause trouble. This kind of person had pride in his bones. Unless he was provoked, he would normally not easily make a move. Jiang Su Su must have provoked him in some way. Looking at Jiang Su Su's attire, in addition to the subsequent events, Jiang Quan had some understanding of his own daughter's heart, and could also guess what had happened. At this very moment, Jiang Quan could not tell whether he was more disappointed or more angry. He was angry that Xiao Xiao and Jiang Ruan were so heartless, and he also hated Jiang Su Su for acting rashly and offending Xiao Xiao without considering the consequences. What kind of person was Jinying Wang? He was someone who even dared to refute the emperor. Provoking him would not end well. What made Jiang Quan even more disappointed was Jiang Su Su's actions. If there were any things that Jiang Quan was proud of in his life, Jiang Su Su could be counted as one of them. He had always been proud of this daughter of his. Jiang Su Su was elegant and refined, and her talent was well known. If not for Xia Yan's matter, all the young masters of the capital's prestigious families would be fighting to pursue her. In Jiang Quan's heart, Jiang Su Su was worthy of any man. Only a high position could serve as a foil to his daughter's extraordinariness. But now, this daughter of his was willing to be lowly like other women in brothels, and did not even hesitate to use underhanded means to climb into other people's beds. Jiang Quan's heart was filled with sorrow for her misfortune, and anger for her incompetence. Originally, he still held on to a glimmer of hope, thinking that if the 8th prince took a fancy to Jiang Su Su, it would not be a bad thing to help Jiang Su Su in the future. But now that this matter had come out, the 8th prince's side was bound to be hopeless. Jiang Su Su had never seen Jiang Quan like this before, and felt a trace of lingering fear in her heart. She hugged Jiang Quan's legs and cried loudly, "Father, Su Su knows she was wrong." Su Su also lost her head for a moment. Su Su saw eldest sister marry so well, but I have this kind of reputation. In the future, I don't know what kind of family I will marry into. Thinking that Jinying Wang valued eldest sister, even if Su Su was willing to become a concubine, with eldest sister's protection, she should be able to live a good life. But I did not expect that things would turn out like this. Father, Su Su knows she was wrong. Father, don't ignore Su Su. Jiang Quan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Jiang Su Su's words had poked at his heart. Thinking of how since Xia Yan's accident, this daughter of his had shut herself up in the courtyard all day and had not come out. Presumably, as an unmarried young girl, she had to pay the price for her mother's lack of virtue. Every day, she was on tenterhooks about whether or not she would be able to marry into a good family, even to the point that a daughter had the idea of becoming a concubine. In Jiang Quan's heart, he felt slightly guilty. In the end, it was his fault as a father. Once the scales in his heart tilted towards Jiang Su Su, when he looked at Jiang Ruan, Jiang Quan was exceptionally unkind. In his heart, he thought that in the end, the blood of the Jiang Fu also flowed in her bones, yet Jiang Ruan did not care about their sibling ties at all. She did not even put him, her father, in her eyes at all. Did she really think that she had someone backing her up? Jiang Quan snorted, "Forget it, I will think of a way to deal with this matter. Don't go out these few days." What about Jiang Ruan? Tell her to come here. This meant that he was going to make a punitive expedition against them. Hong Ying and Jiang Su Su's faces relaxed at the same time. Although Jiang Ruan's calculations were good, she could not stop Jiang Quan's heart from being biased. As long as Jiang Quan was not dead, the person in charge of the Jiang Fu was Jiang Quan. Naturally, Jiang Ruan would have to call him father, and naturally, she would not be able to gain any benefits in the Fu. At this moment, an unfamiliar person dressed as an imperial bodyguard walked in and cupped his hands towards Jiang Quan, replying, "Master Jiang, my master said that young madam is not feeling well, and has brought young madam back to the Wang Fu to have little godly Dr. Xia see her illness. When Jiang Quan heard this, he felt even angrier in his heart. Jiang Ruan was clearly taking drastic measures to remove the firewood from the bottom of the cauldron. He could not ask Jinying Wang Fu for her, but this move by Jiang Ruan was really too sinister. If the person who had come was Jiang Ruan's maidservant, Jiang Quan could still vent his anger, but this person was Xiao Xiao's subordinate. He could neither beat nor scold him, so Jiang Quan could only agree with an ugly expression. The imperial bodyguard scratched his head and suddenly glanced at Hong Ying. Hong Ying felt a little numb from that glance. The next moment, she heard the imperial bodyguard's deeply concerned voice ring out, "Oh, that's right, young madam also said that Enyang in the Fu is pregnant and has been rushing about for a whole day. She is really very tired, so she specially asked Prince Yi to take an invitation to invite an imperial physician from the palace. Presumably, he will be here in a while, so that he can take a good look at Enyang's body, so as to avoid offending the little brother in her belly." Hong Ying's body stiffened, and her complexion suddenly became somewhat pale. She subconsciously wanted to refuse, but the words were at the tip of her tongue. If she refused at this moment, wouldn't she have a guilty conscience? With Xia Yan as an example, Jiang Quan was bound to be even more vigilant towards these matters. Once he discovered any clues, he was bound to get to the bottom of it. But if she obediently stayed where she was, after this, it would be another reign of terror. Her body began to tremble uncontrollably. At this critical juncture, when Jiang Quan was already in a bad mood, if something were to go wrong, how would she end up well? Now that she was riding on a tiger, it was hard to get off. The 2 pillows stuffed into Hong Ying's belly suddenly became heavier than 1,000 caddies. After the imperial bodyguard finished speaking, he punched Jiang Quan in farewell and retreated. Although Jiang Quan was extremely displeased with Jiang Ruan, not everyone could invite an imperial physician. Today, Hong Ying had been rushing about for a whole day, and she was indeed afraid that she might hurt the child in her belly. If an imperial physician came to take a look, it would certainly be much safer. He had never thought that Xiao Xiao would play any tricks on the imperial physician. Firstly, with Xiao Xiao's character, it was not worth it. Secondly, Hong Ying was only pregnant. If there really was a problem, she could very well invite another physician to take a look. It was not so easy to fake this kind of thing. Jiang Quan's heart relaxed, but he did not notice Hong Ying's stiff expression. At this moment, he suddenly heard a young manservant hurriedly run in from outside, saying, "Master, bad news." "What's the matter?" Today's various matters had already caused Jiang Quan to be badly battered, and he had a feeling that he was unable to cope. When he suddenly heard these words, he impatiently roared. The young manservant jumped in fright, and somewhat timidly glanced at Jiang Quan before saying in a low voice, "A large group of people have arrived outside, each of them beating gongs and drums, carrying betrothal gifts, and handing out wedding candies outside the door. They say that after seeing second Mrs. body, they are willing to be second Mrs. husband. In the future, the Jiang Fu will be in-laws." "What?" Before Jiang Quan could reply, Jiang Su shrieked. At this moment, in the horse carriage that was following Xiao Xiao back to the Fu, Lu Zhu asked, "Miss, wouldn't doing this be letting second Miss and fifth Enyang off too easily? Master will definitely think of a way to protect them. Wouldn't Mrs.'s efforts be in vain?" "It won't be." Jiang Ruan looked at the refreshments and tea that had been arranged on the small table in the horse carriage. Xiao Xiao's horse carriage had everything she needed, and he was very considerate, making people feel extremely comfortable. Even the desserts were made according to her favorite taste. Second sister yearns for nothing more than to marry into a noble family and enjoy power, but from now on, she will lose her qualifications. She will even become the type of person she despises the most. In this world, there is no one who can always be at the top. Not being able to be at the top is more painful than killing her. Jiang Ruan said indifferently, "As for Hong Ying, do you really think that Jiang Quan will let her off?" On the surface, Jiang Quan appeared noble and virtuous, but in reality, his heart was not forgiving. Hong Ying dared to deceive Jiang Quan regarding the issue of his children, which was a great taboo of Jiang Quan. Hong Ying's fate would not be very good. Greed was not enough, like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. Everyone had to pay the price for their own greed. It was just that Hong Ying's price was a little too high. "You can't escape," she said. Chapter 166. There was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world, not to mention a young lady of a noble family who had been seen naked in public. That day, rumors and slanders quickly spread through the streets and alleys of the capital. However, when it rains, it pours. This piece of news was not enough. Heaven seemed to think that the Jiang Fu was not troublesome enough, and at the same time, another piece of gossip was released. In Jinying Wang Fu, Jiang Yuan was sitting at the table drinking tea. The high-quality Guizhou purple bamboo shoots paired with the exquisite peony tea bean paste was just the right amount of sweetness, and it was not greasy or annoying. The cooks in Jinying Wang Fu were all first-rate. The food was simple and exquisite. Even the imperial kitchen in the palace might not be able to come up with such good things. The servants in the Fu told Lu Zhu that the old Jinying Wang was a person who paid attention to how he lived his life. These cooks were carefully gathered from outside. However, since the old Jinying Wang couple left, Xiao Xiao's temperament was cold and cheerless, and his food was even more simple. These cooks had always been heroes but had no place to display their skills. Now that a young madam had finally arrived, they naturally used all their skills to please her. They only hoped that they would be fated with Jiang Yuan and have more opportunities to display their culinary skills in the future. Although this reason was somewhat laughable, Lu Zhu's heart gradually calmed down. This was because all of these people's words revealed one piece of information, and that was that the servants of Jinying Wang's Fu sincerely wanted Jiang Yuan to be the young madam. Otherwise, why would they spend so much effort? Now, the few servant girls were most worried about Jiang Yuan. Jinying Wang Fu could be considered a high-ranking marriage, and Xiao Xiao naturally had nothing to say. However, they could not stand the servants bullying the master. Now, the servants in the Fu treated Jiang Yuan with respect. Looking at Jinying Wang Fu and Xiao Xiao, from beginning to end, they could not find a single bad thing. Jiang Yuan was drinking tea when she saw Lian Xiao walk in from outside. She smiled and greeted, "Mississippi." Jiang Yuan responded. Lian Xiao placed the freshly picked flowers into a large vase with gold and phoenix embroidery. Although Jinying Wang Fu's embroidery was outstanding, perhaps because Xiao Xiao's temperament was too cold, he always felt that there was no embellishment and seemed a little bleak. Originally, Xiao Xiao was not a big deal. In the future, Jiang Yuan would also live in Jinying Wang Fu, so Lian Xiao thought that she should add some color. After all, men and women have different thoughts. Even if he plucked a few flowers and put them in a vase, wouldn't it still look a little more human? "Miss," Lian Xiao said as she arranged the flowers, "I have heard of a major event outside today. Can you guess what it is?" Although she tried her best to maintain her composure, there was still a hint of joy on her face, and her eyes couldn't help smiling. Jiang Yuan glanced at her and asked, "Did something happen to Hong Ying?" "Young miss is really amazing." Lian Xiao was dazed for a moment, and then, like a wisp of smoke, she ran in front of Jiang Yuan. Blinking her eyes, she said, "Isn't that right? Today, when this servant went out, I heard that everyone on the streets and alleys were talking about this matter. They said that master kicked concubine Hong and caused her to miscarry." "Miscarriage?" Jiang Yuan's expression flickered. "It's a long story." Hong Ying sat down on a small stool at the side and began to talk about this matter with great interest. Her manner was almost like that of a storyteller in a restaurant. She said, "I heard that yesterday, fifth concubine ran around the whole day, and master invited the imperial physician from the palace to examine fifth concubine's body. At first, she was fine, but when the imperial physician was about to arrive, fifth concubine suddenly said that she was extremely unwell, and only wanted to quickly sleep. This master is also an astute person, and immediately felt that something was wrong, so he argued with fifth concubine. Who knew? Lian Xiao kept Jiang Ruan in suspense. She wanted to arouse Jiang Ruan's curiosity, but when she raised her head, she saw that Jiang Ruan's expression didn't change at all, as if she had already expected this matter. She angrily touched her nose and continued, "Who knew that 2 big cotton pillows would fall out of 5th concubine's stomach?" When Lian Xiao talked about this matter, her eyebrows were beaming with joy. She gestured and said, "At that time, Master found out that he had been deceived, and in the blink of an eye, he gave her a heavy kick, and then..." Lian Xiao coughed twice. "Here comes the most important part." 5th concubine let out a blood-curdling scream, and mournfully said, "You heartless person, how dare you treat me like this?" Master said, I have treated you with absolute sincerity, but you have failed me. I have broken my heart." "Stop, stop, stop." Jiang Ruan stroked her forehead. Lian Xiao's narration was like a storybook, and those who didn't know better would have thought that she had seen it with their own eyes. If she continued, the servants of Jining Wang Fu would gather around to listen to the ready-made storytelling, and she wouldn't even have to pay. She said, "You don't have to say these things." Lian Xiao was very regretful that she couldn't display her talent as a storyteller, but she still honestly said, "Then Master kicked her," and 5th concubine saw red. Coincidentally, the imperial physician arrived at this time, and he took a look. Master's kick was very good, and the child in 5th concubine's stomach was gone. It was a real child, and it wasn't even 3 months yet. Jiang Ruan pondered for a moment, and then said, "So that's how it was." It turned out that on that day, when the imperial physician was about to arrive, Hong Ying, no matter how calm she was, still panicked. When people panicked, it was easy for them to make stupid mistakes. If it was in the past, Hong Ying could be considered as a smart person, and she definitely wouldn't make such a mistake. Yesterday, she must have been so nervous that she had made up such a clumsy excuse. Although Jiang Quan doted on Hong Ying, it didn't mean that he was a fool who could be easily deceived. Moreover, after the incident with Xia Yan, Jiang Quan was sensitive about matters related to children. As soon as he suspected Hong Ying, he became aggressive, and Hong Ying exposed herself during the dispute. How could Jiang Quan not be angry? Being played by his own woman again and again, how could Jiang Quan swallow this insult? No matter how much he usually doted on Hong Ying, at present, in his eyes, Hong Ying's crime was unforgivable. Who knew that by a freak combination of factors, Hong Ying herself didn't know when she was really pregnant? Thinking that she had been holding onto a fluke, she had used some tiger wolf medicine when she was pretending to be pregnant, and this tiger wolf medicine just happened to take effect at this time. Hong Ying was really pregnant, but it was gone with one kick from Jiang Quan. The imperial physician who had been treating Hong Ying also didn't have any control over his mouth. Perhaps he felt that the Jiang family's matter was really something worth joking about, so he turned around and told his colleagues about it. There were so many imperial physicians in the palace. Some were related to the nobility, while some were born in poverty. Because of this, in a short period of time, the news that Jiang Quan had kicked his concubine and caused her to miscarry became known to everyone, from the noble families to the common people. It really did shake the capital. Jiang Ruan lowered her eyes. Jiang Ruan's eyes drooped. In her previous life, Hong Ying had already been unable to put up a fight against Xia Yan at this time, not to mention having children. If she didn't have any other desires in this life, perhaps she would still be able to live a good life. Now, her hopes for the rest of her life had been destroyed. Jiang Quan would absolutely not show mercy to a woman who had turned him into a joke. One could well imagine Hong Ying's fate. However, at present, the one who was suffering the most should be Jiang Quan. Imperceptibly, there had already been a slight estrangement between him and Jiang Chao. The Jiang family had not prospered, and Jiang Quan had valued the child in Hong Ying's womb so much. Now that the child had died by his own hands, to a person like Jiang Quan, it was undoubtedly a huge blow. Lian Xiao continued, "Miss, please listen. 5th Yang is like this, 2nd Miss is still busy. Since noon yesterday, there have been many people surrounding the Fu's entrance, asking to marry 2nd Miss, saying that second Miss's body had been seen by them, and that they had to take responsibility. No matter what, these people could not be chased away, so they called for the imperial bodyguards to come and rescue them. They lay at the entrance, crying to the heavens and wiping the earth, saying that the Jiang Fu treated human life like grass. Master was furious, so he apologized in front of everyone and said that second Miss would be sent to the temple to become a sister-in-law. When second Miss heard this, she fainted and quarreled with Master, but Master was determined to not care. Today, Master has already sent second Miss to the family temple 100 li away. It is said that she is going to cut her hair and become a sister-in-law. Being a sister-in-law is really too good for her. Lian Xiao said indignantly, she should really be married to those people. However, Master has always doted on second Mississippi. This action has undoubtedly ruined second Miss's life. It is shocking. How could it be? Jiang Ruan said indifferently. Lian Xiao heard something strange in her voice and raised her eyes to look. However, she was startled by the coldness in Jiang Ruan's eyes. She only heard Jiang Ruan say, he has spent a lot of effort to pave the way for second younger sister. Wasn't that right? If Jiang Su Su really married one of these street thugs, her life would be ruined. However, if she cut her hair and went to the temple to become a sister-in-law, it would at least preserve the Jiang family's face. It would also give Jiang Su Su a way out, so that her face would not always be trampled on by others. Away from the secular world of the capital, Jiang Su Su would gradually fade out of people's sight until an opportunity for Jiang Su Su to return to the capital appeared. When Jiang Su Su could return to the capital again, it would naturally be when the battle for the throne had ended, the late emperor had passed away, the new emperor had ascended the throne, and the great cause of Xuanli had been completed. At that time, Jiang Quan would probably be rewarded. With fame and power as a guarantee, who would care about Jiang Su Su's past? Jiang Quan had made a good move. In the previous life and this life, he had paved the way for this daughter of his step by step, ensuring that she would be safe and sound. In her previous life, Jiang Su Su had once said that she could not tolerate sand in her eyes. Little did she know that in this life, Jiang Su Su was also a grain of sand in her eyes. In this life, she was vicious and merciless. What she could not stand the most was the scene of a benevolent father and a filial son. Jiang Quan had made a good move, but she did not want to fulfill it. Lian Xiao, go out and tell Jean Eyre. Jiang Ruan lowered her eyes, I want to ask him to help me with something. The secret guards in the Fu, Jean Eyre and Jean San, could not be too far away from Jiang Ruan. Lian Xiao responded and asked, what does Miss want to tell Jean Eyre? Lian Xiao searched outside for a long time but did not see Jean Eyre. Instead, she saw another person dressed as an imperial bodyguard from afar. This person was somewhat familiar, but Lian Xiao could not remember where she had seen him before. In any case, he was Xiao Xiao's subordinate. She stepped forward and inquired, this person, do you know where Jean Eyre is? That person turned around. His eyebrows were like swords and his eyes were bright. He could be considered handsome, and he stared at Lian Xiao for a long time without moving. Lian Xiao felt a little strange from his stare. Her shrewish temper flared up, and she frowned and said, what are you looking at? Just now, it was you who was telling a story inside. The man said. Although his expression was not inappropriate, there was a hint of ridicule in his words. Lian Xiao was startled, and immediately said angrily, what does it have to do with you? You actually dared to eavesdrop. Later, I will tell Mississippi. When His Highness finds out, let's see if he doesn't punish you. This man was none other than Yi Feng. These past few years, he had been given the cold shoulder by Xiao Xiao to gather information in the Yibao Pavilion. His days could be considered dull and tedious. However, without his master's permission, he could not come out on his own. These past few days, Xiao Xiao had summoned him back for the first time. It seemed that he was about to set out and wanted to instruct him to do some things. Just now, when he was outside, he heard Lian Xiao talking to Jiang Ruan about the matters in the Jiang Fu. He was very surprised that this servant girl had such a sharp tongue. If he had such a clown by his side when he was on a mission, he would not have noticed the slightest bit of boredom. Now that he heard Lien Qiao mention Jiang Ruan, his eyebrows twitched. Previously, it was because he had mistaken her for someone else. Because of Jiang Ruan, Xiao Xiao had given him the cold shoulder for a few years. Now that Jiang Ruan's status was even higher, and she was about to become the young madam of Jining Wangfu, if he were to offend her, no, even if he were to offend the young madam's servant girl, with Xiao Xiao's wife-protecting temperament, he was afraid that he would not let him off lightly. Immediately, he said, "It was my fault. Why are you looking for Jiner? Young madam has something for him to do." Lien Qiao had a straightforward temperament and was not a person who fussed over minor matters. Since Yi Feng had already apologized, there was no need for her to keep harping on it. "He has a mission, and is currently not in the Fu," Yi Feng said. Lien Qiao frowned. "Then when can he return to the Fu?" "Tomorrow night." Yi Feng said. "Why, is there an urgent matter?" "Tomorrow night will be a little late." Lien Qiao bit her lip, her expression somewhat anxious. "Why does he have to go out at this time?" Yi Feng was curious. "If there's anything, it would be the same for me to do it." "You?" Lien Qiao gave him a sidelong glance and shook her head. "I really can't trust you." As she looked at him from the corner of her eyes unconsciously emitted the charm of a young girl. The few servant girls by Jiang Ruan's side all had relatively outstanding appearances. Bai Ji was dignified, Lien Qiao was shrewd, Lu Zhu was clever, and Tian Zhu was cold and cheerful. Each had their own unique flavor. Among these few, Lien Qiao and Lu Zhu were the most popular among men. They had not been in Jining Wangfu for a long time, but Xiao Xiao's subordinates were very attentive to Lien Qiao and Lu Zhu. The women that Yi Feng usually met were either as cold and cheerless as those in the genie guards, or as flirtatious as those in the brothel. It was rare to see a woman with such a straightforward and shrewd temperament, whose every move was true to her nature. At present, she had almond-shaped eyes and rosy cheeks, and because she was slightly sullen, her lips were slightly red, making her face even more flushed. Immediately, his heart stirred, and without waiting for Lien Qiao to speak, he grabbed Lien Qiao's wrist. "You can't trust me? But I will make you trust me this time." After saying this, he grabbed Lien Qiao and leaped out of the courtyard, ignoring Lien Qiao's panic-stricken screams. On the roof, Jean San spat out a blade of grass that he was chewing and only said one word, "Silly." Jean C pursed his lips and patted her sleeve. "Let's go and get to work." The area around Mount Yunding was overgrown with weeds and trees. The entire journey was a muddy path, and as the carriage rumbled along, it splashed muddy water from time to time. At this moment, the sky was gradually darkening, and they were still quite a distance away from their destination. There was not even a place to rest, and there was not a single family that they could stay in for the night. Tonight, the carriage was destined to spend the night in the wilderness. Even so, the carriage's decoration could be considered magnificent, and at least from the outside, it looked very comfortable. The coachman was also very experienced, and he did his best to minimize the bumps and potholes along the way. It could be said that he had taken great care of the carriage. The head guard said, "Let's rest here." In the carriage, Jiang Su's face was pale, and her expression was full of indifference. Seeing this, Dragonfly comforted her softly. "Miss, it's getting late. Have some soup and rest." Ever since Butterfly had been sold to a brothel by Jiang Su because of the Zai chariot incident, Jiang Su had never promoted the second-rank servant girls. The first-rank servant girl had always been lacking a position, and it had always been Dragonfly who served by her side. She picked up the bowl and drank the soup. After she finished drinking, she saw that Jiang Su was staring at her without blinking. Dragonfly felt a chill run down her spine from Jiang Su's stare, and whispered, "Miss, do you have any instructions?" Jiang Su sighed. "Dragonfly, do you think I am beautiful?" "Miss is naturally beautiful, and in the whole capital, there is no other beauty like Mississippi," Dragonfly said. These words were not flattery. Jiang Su was originally beautiful, and after practicing the art of charm, she became even more beautiful. I am so beautiful, how can I be a young lady? Jiang Su Su suddenly asked. Mississippi. Dragonfly was stunned. I won't become a sister-in-law. A strange smile appeared on Jiang Su Su's lips. I'm so beautiful. Naturally, I'll be able to find a place to stay and obtain the highest position. How can my appearance be wasted? Dragonfly was somewhat uneasy by Jiang Su Su's strange expression. She wanted to speak, but suddenly felt dizzy. Unable to support herself, she fell onto the small table in the carriage. Mississippi. You drugged me. I will not be a young lady. Jiang Su Su laughed. Dragonfly understood what she wanted to do and said with all her strength, not good. Her voice stopped abruptly. Her eyes widened and she stared at Jiang Su Su in disbelief. The dagger in Jiang Su Su's hand was dripping with blood. She pulled hard, and Dragonfly's body softened and collapsed. Her mouth was open, like a beached fish. She could only helplessly make a rustling sound, but she could not form a sentence. Jiang Su Su did not even look at her. Miss, I was thinking of sparing your life for so many years of service, but you don't know how to appreciate kindness. You are really a dog that is blocking the way. After saying this, she started to take off Jiang Su Su's outer clothes. The guards outside heard the commotion from afar and wanted to come over to ask, but they heard Jiang Su Su say loudly, "Go, throw these out." Then, under the dim moonlight, Dragonfly came out with a tray. Seeing this, the guards returned to their original positions, laughing and drinking, and no longer looked over. Jiang Su Su ran for the time it took to burn a stick of incense. When she saw the entrance to the forest in front of her, she breathed a sigh of relief. She took off her outer clothes, which were still stained with Dragonfly's blood, and threw them on the ground. She clenched the letter in her sleeve. When she woke up today, she did not know who had nailed a letter to the carriage. The letter only said that he had longed for her for a long time and did not want to see her sent to the temple. He was willing to become her shelter and arrange for her to be under his wing. The letter had a faint smell of peach blossom ink. It should have been written by a wealthy family. Looking at the handwriting, it was also romantic. Although Jiang Su Su did not know who this person was, she guessed that he should be the son of a noble family. Presumably, he was one of the people who had longed for her in the past. In the past, Jiang Su Su would have disdained him. But now that even Jiang Quan had given up on her, this person was like a life-saving straw. She firmly believed that she could use her beauty to capture this person's heart. In the future, she would naturally be able to climb up step by step. It was better than being a sister-in-law. This person had also attached a knockout drug, which was why she had used this method. This person wanted her to wait in the forest, but she did not know when he would come. At this moment, the moon was dark and the wind was strong. It was somewhat gloomy, and Jiang Su Su could not help but feel a little afraid. Just as she was panicking, she heard footsteps behind her. Jiang Su Su was delighted and hurriedly turned around, saying, "Is it the young master who wants to save Su Su who has come?" The person's footsteps paused. At this moment, the moonlight shone down and Jiang Su Su's body stiffened. This was because she could clearly see that the person who had come was only a middle-aged man with a terrible scar from his forehead to the corner of his eye. When he saw her, the corner of his mouth snorted and suddenly revealed a lewd smile. Chapter 167. Xian Pei smiled as he swept his gaze over the people in the courtyard. When those eyes fell on them, they did not know why, but they felt that this child was overbearing and did not dare to look directly at him. Unexpectedly, they were awed by his imposing manner. Xian Pei slowly opened his mouth and said, "One has been beaten to death. You will take over the position of personal palace maid." He casually pointed at an unfamiliar palace maid in the crowd. That palace maid had only been assigned to Xian Pei courtyard 2 days ago, and was still a third-rank palace maid. Suddenly, she was promoted to a first-rank palace maid. She immediately bowed and said, this servant Mingyu thanks your highness for your grace. You. Lu Zhu was both embarrassed and anxious. She made a pose to hit her, and the two of them quarreled in the room. Perhaps because today's request had gone smoothly, Jiang Ruan's lips also overflowed with a smile. If it had been her, if it had been her. Jiang Su's heart trembled. What would Jiang Quan do? He probably would not have the courage to acknowledge her, and would have turned and left as a stranger. If it had been a few years ago, Jiang Su would certainly have believed that Jiang Quan would disregard everything to save her. However, ever since the incident with Xia Yan, and the matter of Jiang Quan making her his sister-in-law, Jiang Su's heart had grown estranged from Jiang Quan. Jiang Quan was so selfish, and only cared about the Jiang Fu's reputation. Would he really disregard everything for her? The eunuchs and palace maids in this courtyard were a mix of crooks and honest folk. There were very few who had not bullied Xian Pei before, but now, they looked down and did not dare to say another word. After witnessing Xian Pei's methods, how could they dare to have any other thoughts? They could only be terrified. The man spat, but did not move in the slightest. He only laughed sinisterly and said, "The things that I, Blade Scarly, have set my eyes on have never flown away." A high-ranking official in the capital? Can a high-ranking official in the capital raise such a shameless young lady? Are you trying to scare me into not knowing? Young lady, today, even if you say that you are a nuisance princess, I will still take care of you all the same. This was a bandit's lair located deep in the mountains. The people who lived in this village were all burly men like these bandits. There was not even a single old person or child. Of course, there were also some women who were captured from outside. These women had no status here. They were like objects that could be given to others at will. They even had to serve many men at once. Therefore, the lifespan of women here would not be too long. No one could withstand such inhumane torture. From time to time, the men here would go down the mountain to bring some new women up, and everyone was used to it. However, it was rare to see a high-class woman like Scarfacely. Everyone was envious of Scarfacely. When they gathered together, they would say some superficial sour words. No. No. Jiang Su wanted to escape, but her whole body had long been tormented by Dao Scarfacely to the point where she didn't have a trace of strength left. How could she have any extra energy left? Immediately, she was pushed down by Scarfacely. It seemed that ever since that day when Jiang Ruan had helped Xian Pei out of his predicament in front of Princess Yi, Xian Pei had begun to slowly change. The palace maid did not understand how such a small matter could change Xian Pei. Or perhaps, Xian Pei had always been pretending, and that matter was just a prelude. Now, he had decided to tear off his mask and show his true face. Alone on the bed, Jiang Su's tears silently flowed down her cheeks. She did not know how things had turned out this way. The young master who had come to rescue her had not appeared, and she had been taken back to the bandits' lair by the mountain bandits. Whenever she recalled the scene just now, Jiang Su could not help but tremble all over. Dao Scarfacely was a demon, and his actions were extremely heavy. Moreover, he had taken possession of her body. Jiang Su painfully closed her eyes and grabbed the quilt under her hands. Now that she was living like this, there was no hope of escaping. If she became the exclusive property of such a person, it would be better to be a nun in a temple. Jiang Su saw that this person was so stubborn, and the young master in the letter had not come after so long. She panicked and turned to run out, shouting loudly for help. "Someone, help me." Mingyu thought for a moment. It was Hong and Junju who said that His Highness lacked someone who knew martial arts by his side, so Master sent this servant here. When they returned to the room, Lian Xiao recounted everything that had happened today to Jiang Ruan. At the end, she said, "Miss, this servant acted on her own accord. Please punish me." After standing for a while, Yi Feng seemed to remember something and hurriedly flew away. In a hidden cave a few miles away, a young woman was sitting in the same place, glaring at him. Seeing him return, she finally heaved a sigh of relief, but the first thing she asked was, "Has the matter been settled?" The night was as dark as ink. In the depths of the forest, there was a village. At this moment, there were still some voices, accompanied by some noisy clamor and vulgar curses. A group of shirtless men squatted at the door, and there were some wine pots scattered on the ground. In the midst of the overwhelming smell of alcohol, one of them said, "I heard that Dow Scarfacely brought a woman back today. That woman looks pretty good. What kind of family did the mountain bandits have?" Their temperament was crude, and it was even more impossible for them to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. When Jiang Su Su entered the mountain bandits' lair, she had encountered a group of tigers and wolves. Those mountain bandits had always been generous to women. Jiang Su Su was naturally arrogant and would certainly not serve the man tenderly. Thinking about the consequences of angering the man, Yi Feng could not help but sigh for Jiang Su Su. Jiang Su Su was startled, and in her heart, she understood that this person was definitely not the one who had sent the letter. Looking again at this person, who was dressed in plain clothes and had a fiendish appearance, she could not help but feel her legs tremble. However, she still forced herself to calm down and said, "What do you want? Do you know who I am? My father is a high-ranking official in the capital. Take advantage of the fact that my bodyguards have not arrived yet and quickly scram." Lian Xiao turned her face away and softly cursed at her bad luck, but her face quietly reddened. Seeing this, Yi Feng also felt somewhat awkward. The atmosphere in the cave suddenly became somewhat strange. Yi Feng coughed lightly and said, "Let's go back to the Fu." "I don't blame you." Jiang Ruan said, "Yi Feng would have done the same thing. After all, he is Xiao Xiao's man." The servants looked at each other in dismay, and a few palace maids glared at Mingyu before taking their leave. Xian Pei turned to enter the room and sat down at the desk in the room. Mingyu closed the door and entered as well, standing in front of Xian Pei. Only then did Xian Pei raise his head and look at Mingyu. "Did Jinying Wang send you?" Hearing this, Xian Pei became even happier. Squinting his eyes, he smiled and said, "Of course, she is my." His words suddenly paused before he continued, "I am the person who will testify for her." That palace maid looked at Xian Pei with some disbelief. She did not know whether Xian Pei was really stupid or just pretending to be stupid. If he was really stupid, how could she, the spy, be pulled out so easily? If he was pretending to be stupid, Xian Pei clearly knew that she was from that side. How could he have the guts to easily punish her? "What virgin?" A big, fat man wiped the sweat off his forehead. "I heard that when she was meeting her lover, she was seen by Blade Scarly. How can she be clean when she has already pledged her marriage to someone else?" He revealed a wretched smile. "It's just letting him have a taste first. When he's done playing, we can also get a share." Moreover, Blade Scarly's words just now had indeed pierced her heart. Indeed, once such a thing happened to the daughter of a wealthy family, if she was kidnapped by bandits, her entire life would be equivalent to being ruined. Even if she was finally brought back, most of the time, she would only be fed a pill. That woman would also be able to extricate herself, and her family would not have to be laughed at by others. Wishful thinking. Jiang Su Su sneered. Even at this moment, her attitude had not softened in the slightest. Her eyes were filled with the desire to peel off Dao Bali's skin and eat Dao Bali's flesh. "When my father finds me, he will definitely not let you off." After the man left with Jiang Su Su, a person appeared in the forest. Under the moonlight, his features were clear. It was Yi Feng. He whistled, knowing that Jiang Ruan's task had been completed. Today, Jiang Ruan had merely borrowed his hand to deliver the letter to Jiang Su Su. As for the wilderness and forest area, the bandits had to pass through at night to return to their lair. As a member of the Genie Guard, Yi Feng knew this, but he did not know how Jiang Ruan, a lady, knew about it. However, in the end, he still somewhat admired Jiang Ruan's divine foresight. Perhaps because she and Jiang Su Su were both daughters of the Jiang Fu, she was also very familiar with Jiang Su Su's temperament. She actually knew that with Jiang Su Su's temperament, once she saw that letter, she would definitely escape and think of a way to not be a sister-in-law. Bai Ji saw Yi Feng standing outside the courtyard. She thoughtfully looked at Lian Xiao and softly said, "Let's go back to the room and talk." Yi Feng sighed in his heart. Jiang Ruan's method was really sinister. She had given Jiang Su Su hope, and then Jiang Su Su had personally witnessed this hope shattering in front of her eyes. One could imagine how devastated she was. Jiang Ruan did not let anyone directly kidnap Jiang Su Su, but only guided her slightly, piecing together a series of coincidences. Even if Jiang Quan finally investigated, he would only find out that Jiang Su Su had voluntarily escaped from the carriage. As for Jiang Su Su's ending, it was completely her doing. In the future, when Jiang Su Su thought of this matter, would her intestines turn green? The surrounding eunuchs and palace maids did not dare to make a sound, and motionlessly hung their heads. The palace maid kneeling on the ground was still pleading, "13th Highness," this servant was momentarily blinded by greed. "In the future, I will not dare to do it again. I beg your Highness to spare this servant's life, for the sake of this servant serving your Highness for so many years." In a dilapidated house in the village, after the thought-provoking voice had passed, there was a "pa" sound. Someone had used a match to light up the oil lamp in the house, and the optical fiber inside immediately lit up. A faintly smelly thin blanket was spread on the extremely dirty wooden bed. At this moment, the thin blanket was covered with stains, and a woman was lying on her back. That person laughed mischievously. Where did this young lady come from, coming to this desolate wilderness to meet her lover in the middle of the night? It's just that your little lover didn't keep the appointment tonight, making you sad for nothing. Why don't Laoi come and comfort you? But in this desolate wilderness, she had just run for a long time in order to shake off that group of imperial bodyguards. She was so far away that her voice only drifted a few times in the wilderness outside the forest before it dissipated. Immediately after, a strong force dragged her back from behind. Jiang Su Su was suddenly pulled from behind, and with a "pa" sound, a slap landed on her face. This person was not Jiang Quan, so naturally, he would not have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. With a heavy slap, Jiang Su Su almost fainted, and blood flowed from the corner of her lips. What do you want to do?" Jiang Su Su was startled, and asked with trembling lips. When the two of them returned to Jining Wangfu, Lian Xiao had just walked into the courtyard when she saw Lu Zhu hurriedly coming to greet her. She looked her up and down, and upon seeing that she was fine, let out a sigh of relief. "Where did you go? Why did you only return now?" However, Lu Zhu looked at Lian Xiao with a grin and said, "Sister Lian Xiao really cares about Guardyi. Why is it that your words are trying to absolve Guardyi? It can't be that your heart aches for him, right?" The palace maid suddenly understood and screamed, "Your Highness, don't." No. Immediately after, her mouth was gagged, and she struggled to whimper. A few sturdy old women dragged the palace maid away. Everyone was silent, and watched as that immature highness turned around and sat back on the chair by the door, as if nothing had happened. Yi Feng stood in the rustling cold wind and could not help but shiver. In his heart, he thought that this future young madam was indeed formidable. Her skill in killing people without spilling blood could be considered to have reached perfection. In the future, he must serve her carefully, and must not provoke her. Not to mention that the young master was making decisions for young madam, just young madam alone was enough to toy with the people of Jining Wangfu to death. "You damned hussy, you dare to talk nonsense in front of a young lady. See if I don't tear your mouth apart." However, Lian Xiao was not a gentle person. She immediately replied in a shrewd manner, "I don't know who was it that chatted and laughed with that Jiner every day. Today, you must have seen that you were embroidering a handkerchief. Is that handkerchief for Jiner?" The man in the lead chuckled, "Young lady, don't be afraid. Brother Dao Ba said that you don't understand the rules, so he specially sent us brothers to teach you the rules. Don't be afraid, we are very gentle. It's her." Xian Pei immediately sat up straight. His current stature was small, and when he sat on the oversized chair, it was rather comical. "You still dare to act pretentiously in front of me, it seems that you haven't learned your lesson. After saying this, he coldly snorted, and without even looking at Jiang Su, picked up the clothes on the table and left. Xian Pei noticed her expression and smiled slightly. So, it's not that I don't want to spare you, it's that I really have the heart but I'm powerless. After saying this, he indifferently turned around. The auspicious beast embroidered at the corner of his robe bared its fangs and brandished its claws, streaking across the night like a dark ray. His voice was accompanied by the sound of the wind in the moonlight as it floated over, carrying a childish cruelty. When the others heard this, they all revealed a tacit smile. The man looked her up and down, then suddenly laughed and said, "You're a fiery one, and you're also beautiful. Good, I have profited today. I'll bring you back to the mountain, and tonight we'll consummate our marriage." After saying this, regardless of Jiang Su's weak struggles, he carried her on his shoulder and walked towards the forest. Lian Xiao hesitated for a moment, then said, "Imperial bodyguard Yi also wanted to help this servant, I hope that Miss will not blame him." "Today's matter, in any case, is settled," Xian Pei frowned, meddling in other people's business. The way Yi frowned was somewhat childish, like a child throwing a tantrum. Lian Xiao was still rubbing her nose when she suddenly felt a warmth on her body. She raised her head and saw that Yi Feng had taken off his outer robe and draped it over her body. He said, "Cough, today it's all my fault, I've implicated you." Jiang Su seemed to have finally reacted. She turned her head with difficulty and fiercely spat at Knife Scar Li's eye. Previously, it wasn't that everyone didn't think about it, but they just felt that the 13th prince was still a child who wasn't even 10 years old. He was young and soft-hearted. Moreover, although this personal palace maid bullied her master, she had a glib tongue and was able to coax Xian Pei into a happy mood. It was inevitable that he would invite her over. Who knew that this little master would be so decisive and make a decision without even thinking about it? For a moment, the people in the courtyard couldn't help but ponder. Some were happy about this, while others were secretly alarmed and shouted that it was bad. This group of burly men were all middle-aged, and their bodies had more or less scars from knives and swords. Their appearances were also fierce and fiendish, and their bodies reeked of sweat and alcohol. It was a little disgusting. Yi Feng looked at Lian Xiao in astonishment. He originally thought that Lian Xiao's first words would be to scold him, but he didn't expect that her first words of concern would be the task. Yi Feng snapped his fingers. Naturally, it's settled. It was a windy night in the wilderness, and Lian Xiao was only wearing a thin emerald green dress. She couldn't help but sneeze. Seeing this, Yi Feng's heart gave birth to a faint layer of guilt. Speaking of which, he was also impulsive today, directly kidnapping Lian Xiao. Lian Xiao couldn't return to the Fu for a long time, and she was afraid of delaying Jiang Ruan's matters. Helpless, she could only hand over the letter to him. In order to prove that he was indeed capable of handling such a small matter, Yi Feng ignored Lian Xiao's protests and brought Lian Xiao along. The second-ranked palace maids in the courtyard originally wanted to take this opportunity to show off, but they didn't expect to be pushed away by a newcomer. They were all unhappy and wanted to say a few words. When they saw Xian Pei's smiling expression, they couldn't help but shiver. Thinking that this little master was no longer someone who could be easily fooled in the past, they could only suppress the indignation in their hearts and forcefully endure it. This woman's eyes were wide open, and her originally beautiful face was full of red marks and palm prints. It was obvious that she had suffered a great deal of abuse. As for her entire body, there wasn't a single piece of good flesh. Just looking at the purple marks would make one tremble. At this moment, her body was placed in an unbearable position, but she didn't move at all. She had already been tossed around until she didn't have a trace of strength left. Smelly whore, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Knife Scar Li stretched out his hand and firmly pinched Jiang Su's chin. Such a beautiful face, I still want to keep it for a few more days to be happy. Knife Scar Li sat up and looked at Jiang Su while putting on his clothes. When his gaze fell on Jiang Su's spotlessly white neck, he couldn't help but shift his gaze. He leaned over and kissed her fiercely. Beat her to death. There were many ways to torture people in the world, but it was rare to completely destroy their spirit. Jiang Su wholeheartedly wanted to climb into a noble family and live a superior life, but once she entered the mountain bandit's lair, she could no longer easily come out. Every day, she would have to live a lowly life. Wasn't that more painful than beating and killing her? Mingyu nodded. The palace maid just now was originally Xian Pei's personal palace maid. For so many years, she had been a slave who bullied her master. However, she had a backer behind her and could be considered an informer. It was just that she had always been by the side of the obscure 13th prince. Perhaps she felt that there was no future, so she acted unscrupulously. Since the last time he had helped Jiang Yuan testify, Xian Pei's conduct had become somewhat unusual. Unfortunately, this palace maid had not noticed it and was still so arrogant. She didn't expect Xian Pei to be the first to use her as an example. He casually found a reason to beat her to death. She raised her head and once again looked at Xian Pei seriously. However, she was surprised to find that she really couldn't connect the young boy in front of her with the child in her memory. The child in front of her had not yet grown up, but he already had a faint aura of an emperor. That pair of eyes were as transparent as colored glass, but it was impossible to see the bottom of them. There was always a bright and beautiful smile on his face, even when he was reprimanded by others. He didn't show his joy or anger on his face. Had this child already reached such a stage of not showing his emotions? After accompanying this incompetent 13th prince for so many years, she had always thought that she could firmly grasp this prince in the palm of her hand. From a young age, he had often beaten and scolded her. She didn't know when, but this child seemed to have changed into a different person. He no longer cowardly hid behind others, but instead, he made others feel intimidated. If this had happened to Xiao Xiao, it would have been like meddling in other people's business, but if it had happened to Jiang Yuan, it would have been kindness and consideration. The difference was too big. Mingyu suppressed her laughter and said, "Your Highness and Junju must have been brought together by fate. Your expressions and mannerisms are 70% similar." When Jiang Su saw this, her heart went cold. She took 2 steps back and said, "Who are you?" Chapter 168. In the end, the matter of Jiang Su's inexplicable disappearance was exposed. The dozen or so imperial bodyguards who had followed her did not realize that something was wrong until dawn broke the next day. They called out a few times, but no one responded. Only then did they discover that there was only a dead servant girl in the carriage, and that the young miss was nowhere to be seen. When the dozen or so imperial bodyguards returned to the minister's fu in a panic and reported the matter to Jiang Quan was so angry that he almost fainted. However, the words of the imperial bodyguards were clear. Jiang Su had killed her personal servant girl, disguised herself as her personal servant girl, and escaped by herself. She could not blame anyone else. The people that Jiang Quan had sent also confirmed that this was indeed the case. Besides cursing the wicked girl, Jiang Quan could not say anything else. It was just that the dignified young miss of a fu had escaped by herself, and her whereabouts were unknown. It was not something that could be explained clearly. Those dozen or so imperial bodyguards could not be left alive, so Jiang Quan ordered them to be dealt with. Perhaps these imperial bodyguards knew that they had been wronged, and used some unknown method to expose this matter before they died. In a short time, the entire capital knew that Jiang Quan had lost his fu's second Mississippi. During this period of time, the entire minister's fu was in the eye of the storm. Walking on the streets and alleys, everywhere people talked, they could not escape the Jiang family's involvement. Jiang Quan was mad with anger, but it was difficult to stop everyone's mouths. Jiang Yuan had been brought back to Jinying Wang Fu by Xiao Xiao, or she had been sent to the palace to accompany Empress Dowager Ida. In short, it was a drastic measure that Jiang Quan could do nothing about. In this way, Jiang Quan doubled the resentment in his heart and vented it on Hong Ying, who had suffered a miscarriage. Hong Ying's body was already weak, and Jiang Quan punched and kicked her every day, intending to torture her to death. Hong Ying knew that she had no way out, so one night, she swallowed gold and died. A concubine, who had lost favor, died. Jiang Quan did not even ask for a coffin to be prepared for her. He directly ordered an old woman to roll her up in a tattered mat and throw her into the mass grave. A beauty of a generation had passed away just like that, but it was hard to say whether it was a pity or something else. As a result, in such a large Jiang Fu, besides the eldest concubine who lived in seclusion, there were no other concubines. Because of this, Jiang Quan had suffered a great blow. He often stood in the courtyard, lost in thought. In the past, the sweet and tender voices of the young ladies formed a sharp contrast with the current cold and desolate atmosphere, making it seem that the entire Jiang Fu was gradually on the verge of collapse. Jiang Chao was even more anxious than Jiang Quan. Jiang Chao and Jiang Su Su were siblings born from the same mother. Jiang Su Su had been doted on since she was young, so Jiang Chao naturally doted on her. Although he was angry at Jiang Su Su for being so impulsive, he still asked Xianli for help and sent a group of people to search for Jiang Su Su's whereabouts. Now that he could be considered useful to Xianli, Xianli would naturally adopt the attitude of a virtuous ruler. Naturally he would do his best to help him. Xianli's men were indeed much more useful than the servants of the Jiang Fu. At least, the men that Jiang Quan had sent out had yet to find out her whereabouts. Xianli's men had already reported to Jiang Chao, replying to young master, "We have already found the whereabouts of the second Jiang Mississippi." At that time, Jiang Chao was practicing calligraphy in his study. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't calm down, and his handwriting was crooked. When he heard this, his hands suddenly trembled and a large drop of ink fell onto the snow-white Xian paper, enshrouding a large ink flower. He raised his head and anxiously asked, "Where is she?" "This." The guard looked somewhat awkward and did not speak for a long time. A bad premonition suddenly arose in Jiang Chao's heart. He no longer cared about anything else, grabbed the guard's collar and roared, "How is it?" Replying to young master. The guard was startled by Jiang Chao's appearance and no longer dared to conceal anything. He said, "The spies have come to report that the second young miss has been captured and brought to the mountain bandits' lair. At present, it has already been a few days." With a "pa" sound, Jiang Chao could no longer hold the brush in his hand. The fine white jade weasel bristle brush fell to the ground with a crisp sound. In the quiet room, it was particularly clear. The guard felt that the surrounding atmosphere was so stagnant that it was terrifying. He remained motionless and lowered his head, not daring to look at Jiang Chao's expression. After an unknown amount of time had passed, Jiang Chao's gnashing teeth could be heard saying, "Prepare the horse." "Young master." The guard was startled. When he met Jiang Chao's gaze, he could not help but stare blankly. That pair of slightly gloomy eyes were now filled with a deep hatred and madness. It was almost as if he would destroy everything in the next moment. That terrifying gaze, his expression was extremely calm. It was so calm that it was distorted. He said, come with me to save the second young Mississippi." Deep in the mountains, the sunlight seemed to be blocked by the dense canopy of trees. Only a few spots of sunlight shone down. If the women in the brothel had a red card, they would still have to put on some airs. However, here, women had no dignity to speak of. When night came, these wild beasts only cared about venting their animal language. The lifespan of women here was not long. No one could endure such a long period of torment. It was not that they had not thought of escaping. However, the people here had their own way of dealing with women who ran away. They would catch them and beat them up. Then, they would lock them up and repeat the nightmares of the night. In just a few days, there was not a single part of Jiang Su Su's body that was unharmed. Among this group of women, her appearance was the best. Her skin was also the most delicate. Moreover, she was a newcomer. Almost every man was full of interest in her. Therefore, her days were exceptionally bitter. In a place like this, those so-called seductive techniques were useless. Seductive techniques were naturally very useful when used to deal with the sons of the aristocratic families. However, in this barren mountain and wilderness, other than arousing more men's bestial desires, it was useless. This was because these mountain bandits did not know how to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. Deep in their bones, there was only tyranny and plunder. As a result, in a short period of time, Jiang Su's figure was thin and her bones stood erect. It was as if she had changed into another person. After she finished washing her clothes, she was about to return to the house to gather firewood to start a fire to cook. Unexpectedly, she had only walked halfway when she heard the sound of galloping horses. The leader of the group stopped the horse in front of her, flipped down, and called out, "Younger sister." Jiang Su raised her head somewhat sluggishly. It seemed that it took her a long time to clearly see the person in front of her. Stunned, she called out, "Older brother." Jiang Chao simply looked at Jiang Su in disbelief. In his heart, Jiang Su had always been untainted by a speck of dust. She was as beautiful as a fairy. There had never been a speck of dust on her body. Now, who was this dirty, haggard, and smelly woman? Was it still his younger sister, who was the most beautiful woman in the capital? Jiang Su looked at Jiang Chao and blinked her eyes. Suddenly, her eyes reddened and 2 streams of tears rolled down. Without caring about anything else, she hugged Jiang Chao tightly and cried, "Older brother, why did you only come now?" Being hugged by Jiang Su, the tip of Jiang Chao's nose was immediately filled with a nauseating stench. This pair of brother and sister had always lived a luxurious and pampered life in the Jiangfu. From the bottom of their hearts, they looked down on the poor and considered themselves to be a cut above others. When Jiang Chao saw Jiang Su in such a sorry state, he was already shocked. When Jiang Su hugged him like this, he subconsciously reached out to push Jiang Su away. However, when he reached out, he was stunned. He stared blankly at the red marks on Jiang Su's neck. The scouts who had returned had reported that Jiang Su had been kidnapped and taken to the mountain bandits' lair for a few days. She was certainly no longer a virgin. However, thinking about it in his heart was different from seeing it with his own eyes. Looking at the marks on Jiang Su's body, the last trace of hope in Jiang Chao's heart flew away. His mind went blank and he was somewhat speechless. Jiang Su was completely unaware that the moment she saw Jiang Chao, she gradually walked out of the numb sadness and resignation of her fate from the past few days. There was only endless hatred in her heart, and her voice became sharp and distorted. "Older brother, you have to avenge me. You have to kill all the mountain bandits here. These mountain bandits, they are not human, they hit me. Older brother, kill them all." Jiang Su cried and laughed at the same time. Her voice was already on the verge of breaking down, but the hatred in her words did not diminish in the slightest. Jiang Chao was her older brother, so he had to avenge her. These dirty, smelly men would all become corpses later. As long as she thought of this, Jiang Su's heart was filled with joy. She said, "And those women, they have seen me. Not a single one of them can be left alive." She only cared about venting the pain in her heart these past few days and did not notice Jiang Chao's expression. Jiang Chao stared fixedly at the red marks on Jiang Su's neck. His gaze was blank and there was a trace of absent-mindedness in his eyes. Jiang Su had already become like this. Even if he brought her back, her body would no longer be pure. Originally, this younger sister was as beautiful as a fairy. It was highly possible that she would pave the way for his official career and the Jiang family's meteoric rise. She might even become the mother of the nation in the golden age of her youth. But now, all his plans had been ruined. Jiang Su's reputation was no longer known and she was no longer pure. Relying on her beauty, it was no longer possible for her to climb into a marriage that was beneficial to the Jiangfu. If today's matter were to spread out one day, Jiang Su would become the mountain bandits' plaything. The dignified daughter of the minister's office had actually lost her purity to a motley crew. If that happened, Jiang Su's existence would be a spark that could ignite a big fire at any time. Leaving her alive would be a hidden danger. Moreover, Jiang Chao's eyes darkened. Now that he was working under Xianli, he had already gradually improved. Xianli had also begun to put him in an important position. Because of Xia Yan's matter, he had already received a lot of advice from his colleagues. If there was another Jiang Su, it would be very difficult for his future official career to advance. Those colleagues who had been fighting with him both openly and covertly would certainly not let go of this opportunity to hit him when he was down. No, they might have already started to act. The news of Jiang Su's disappearance had already spread throughout the capital. If he could find Jiang Su, others would definitely be able to as well. He could not let Jiang Su's existence become his stumbling block. Jiang Chao's gaze fluctuated a few times, as if he had finally made a decision. He looked at Jiang Su, who had thrown herself into his arms, and reached out to stroke her somewhat dirty hair. He gently comforted her, "All right, I will kill them for you. Second brother will avenge you. These women, as well as the bandits, not a single one will be able to escape. I will send them all to see the king of hell." Jiang Su tightly grabbed onto Jiang Chao's clothes and said, "There is also Jiang Ruan, that slut. If she had not schemed against me, how would I have ended up like this? Gidge, I have fallen to this state all thanks to that slut. There is also Xiao, the two of them joined forces to harm me. If I do not avenge them, I am not a human." "All right," Jiang Chao's voice was so gentle that it could drip water. He lovingly patted Jiang Su's shoulder, as if he really was a kind and amiable elder brother. He comforted her, "Jiang Ruan, Jiang Chao, and the General Fu, Jinying Wang Fu, don't let a single one of them off. Gidge will avenge you. These people hurt you, I want them all to accompany you in death." Jiang Su nestled in Jiang Chao's arms, feeling very happy in her heart, but she also ignored Jiang Chao's strange gaze. She asked, "Gidge, when are we returning to the Fu?" "Returning to the Fu?" Jiang Chao said apologetically, "Younger sister, you cannot return to the Fu." "What?" Before Jiang Su could understand, she felt a chill in her chest. She looked down and saw that a snow-white sword had already pierced through her chest. The other end of the sword hilt was in Jiang Chao's hand. Jiang Chao pulled the sword back and Jiang Su spat out a mouthful of blood, her body softly falling to the ground. Everything had happened so quickly that she did not even have the time to ask why. She could only stare at Jiang Chao with wide eyes filled with unwillingness. Jiang Su would never have thought that the rescue that she had waited for in every possible way would ultimately die in the hands of her own elder brother. "I'm sorry, Su," Jiang Chao averted his eyes, not daring to look at Jiang Su's corpse. "I cannot let you block my way. To achieve great things, one should not bother about trifles. Moreover, this is also to free you early." He sighed, "Don't be afraid, mother will soon come down to accompany you. You will not feel lonely. As for the matter that I have promised you, I will not forget to avenge you." At night, in a rural residence a few hundred miles away from the capital, in a dilapidated, pitch-black house, a figure sat quietly. The oil lamp had long since dried up. It was obvious that no one had come here to add oil to the lamp for a long time. The room was filled with the smell of death and decay. The woman was already very old, the white hair at her temples was stuck together by oil and dirt, messily unkempt at the back of her head. Her body also seemed to have not been cleaned for a long time, as if a layer of armor had formed over her entire body. Only a pair of large eyes vaguely revealed her former elegance, but it was only in the past. Xia Yan did not know how long she had stayed here. Day after day, no one spoke to her. Every day, she lived in seclusion in this place. There were no fresh fruits or vegetables, only rancid food, dirty blankets, and a damp roof. Sometimes she was crazy, and sometimes she was sober. Most of the time she was crazy, but right now she was sober. Today, she did not know why, but she felt an inexplicable sense of unease in her heart. An inexplicable sense of melancholy blocked her heart, as if something big was about to happen. She reached out her hand, which was covered in black mud, in vain and scratched the ground. However, she heard the door creak open. Xia Yan abruptly raised her head and saw a person walk in with a match in his hand and gently close the door. She had not seen light for a long time, and for a moment, the light was so dazzling that she could not clearly see the person in front of her. The person put the match aside and sat down. The light slowly subsided, and Xia Yan also began to adapt to this temporary light. She only heard a familiar voice say, "Mother." Xia Yan was shocked, and tears immediately flowed from her eyes. She had lived in this place day after day, being bullied, humiliated, and beaten, as if she had been forgotten by everyone. She had never imagined that her own son would appear in front of her, alive and well. She opened her mouth, but because she had not spoken for a long time, her throat made a dry sound. Seeing Xia Yan's appearance, Jiang Chao also seemed to be extremely shaken. Immediately after, a trace of anger appeared in his eyes. "They actually treated you like this." Previously, Xia Yan had harbored a grudge against Jiang Chao because he had not come to see her, and because Chen Fong had said that the noble person would sooner or later kill her to keep her quiet. Now, seeing Jiang Chao's appearance, she did not have the slightest bit of anger. She thought that, after all, Jiang Chao was her son, and he would always side with her. It was all these wicked slaves who had acted on their own initiative. After all, Jiang Chao still recognized her as his biological mother. However, Xia Yan did not think that if he really cared about his biological mother, why had he not asked about her for such a long time? Even if Jiang Chao was usually very busy, it would have been good to send a servant to check on the situation. Just like when Jiang Yuan had been sent to the rural residence to be bullied and humiliated, these people had only dared to run amok because they had seen Jiang Chao's indifferent attitude towards Xia Yan. Jiang Chao was not that stupid. Naturally, he knew that Xia Yan had been sent to the rural residence to be bullied, but he had remained indifferent. This person's inner selfishness had already reached the extreme. Although Xia Yan was vicious, she was a competent mother. Everything she had done was to pave the way for Jiang Chao and his sister. Unfortunately, these two siblings cared only about themselves and did not care about their biological mother. Jiang Chao glanced at Xia Yan and suddenly said, "Mother, younger sister is dead." Xia Yan was stunned and looked at Jiang Chao in shock. However, Jiang Chao continued, "She fell into someone else's trap and angered father. Father wanted to send her to the nunnery to be a nun, but she refused. Taking advantage of the night, she escaped and was caught in the mountain bandits' lair. She was raped and committed suicide." His words were spoken calmly, but every word was like a knife stabbing into Xia Yan's heart. Xia Yan let out a blood-curdling scream, but could no longer speak. Only 2 streams of tears fell incessantly. "Why did you not protect her?" she asked with great difficulty. "Protect her?" Jiang Chao sneered, "How could I have protected her? Mother is my and younger sister's mother, shouldn't she have protected us? Do you know how younger sister fell into someone else's trap? Younger sister wanted to seduce Jinying Wang and willingly become a concubine. Mother, do you know why younger sister, a dignified daughter, would willingly become a concubine? Because mother's reputation has been ruined. Up until now, no one has proposed marriage to younger sister. Jiang Yuan, that slut, has already obtained the Empress Dowager's decree to marry Jinying Wang. Yet younger sister, because of mother's corrupt morals, no one is interested in her. Younger sister's current death was caused by mother." Xia Yan's entire body trembled as she looked at Jiang Chao in disbelief. At that time, she had clearly fallen into someone's trap. Even if others doubted her morals, Jiang Chao was her biological son. How could he say such a thing? What she did not know was that because his own reputation had been ruined, Jiang Chao could not lift his head in front of his colleagues. This matter was often used by others to slander him. Today, when Jiang Chao accused Jiang Su of dying because of her, he was actually venting his resentment. He blamed Xia Yan. No, it wasn't me, Xia Yan said. Jiang Chao shook his head. That's not important, mother. It's just that I promised younger sister that I would avenge her. Now that Jining Wang and Jiang Ruan's ranks are higher than mine, only if I advance in my career will I be able to avenge younger sister. He looked at Xia Yan, a strange light flashing in his eyes. As for mother, as long as you are alive, I will have a reason to be criticized by others and will never be able to be promoted in a dignified manner. Xia Yan took a long time to understand the meaning of Jiang Chao's words. She stared at her own son as if she did not know him. You want me to die? Since mother dotes on my brother and sister so much, I also want to fulfill younger sister's long-cherished wish. Right now, I really can't think of any other way. Jiang Chao's voice was low, but there was not a trace of guilt in it. Mother is an intelligent person, surely you wouldn't want that slut Jiang Ruan to climb on top of your son's head. Unfilial son. Xia Yan gasped for air. Get lost. Jiang Chao shook his head. This time, I came because blood is thicker than water and I wanted to make mother feel better. Since mother is so ungrateful, I can only drop it. It's just that, some things, the process is not important, the result is important, isn't that right? You want to kill me? Xia Yan's eyes widened. No, I believe that mother will understand, isn't that right? He smiled slowly, revealing his spotlessly white teeth. However, he no longer had his previous bright and cheerful demeanor. Under the lamplight, he was like a crazed wild beast. He said, the beams in this room are high enough. Mother, using a life in exchange for a clean reputation, does mother know what's the most cost-effective? Without asking, he walked out the door. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.